I died at my desk at 2 in the morning. The next thing I heard was a room full of strangers and a slap on the back of my legs. I was born again as a farmer's son named Kang Ran, and my system paid me for repetition. Anything I did enough times became a skill. At 8, I took a bandit chief off his horse with a stick. After 2 years quietly eating rice, I grew myself. Nobody gets to skip the work. I got paid for it. Smash that like button and subscribe so you do not miss the next part. The channel grows when you do. How did I end up here? Let me take you back to the very first day. The last thing I owned in my old life was a half-finished spreadsheet and the blue burn of a monitor at 2 in the morning. Then the light went out of me, and I came back into a room full of voices I did not know. My first thought was a complaint about the noise and the shift waiting for me at dawn, which tells you what kind of man I had been. I opened my mouth to say it and produced a thin, cracked wail. When I lifted a hand to rub my eyes, the hand that came into view was small and pink and soft. Somebody caught me by the ankles, swung me upside down, and slapped my backside 3 times. The shouting, the wet, the woman sobbing past the edge of my vision, all of it arranged into one word, and the word was delivery. So I had died, and I had been born, and I was roughly 4 minutes old. 3 more slaps came down, and I understood my most urgent task was to cry as loudly as I could. I cried, and a chime went off behind my eyes, calm as a shop bell, announcing that the host had learned to cry and that the skill called learning was active. A system. I did not know what world I had landed in, but I had backing, and backing was more than I had ever started with. 3 years later, I am 4 years old, sitting cross-legged with a book open on my knees. By now I have a rough map of how the system operates, built the slow way by testing it. It takes certain actions and sublimates them into skills, and every skill carries a progress bar only I can see. Repeating the action feeds the bar fills, and the skill levels up. That is the whole machine, and it is generous in one direction only, since everything past the first push comes down to me. I call the panel up and read down it. The name reads Kang Ran, and the title line reads Prodigy, currently equipped with Night Owl parked behind it. Lifespan reads 4 years lived against a maximum of 78, and comprehension ability reads 65, 20 of that borrowed from the title. Appraisal sits at max level and has since I was born, a free gift I stopped thinking about. Learning reads minor achievement, 12% of the way toward whatever comes after it. Once I understood what the system rewarded, I became the most studious infant in the province. Learning started at entry level and climbed to minor achievement, and the level up handed me the comprehension ability attribute. Anything I learn, a thing or an ability, pushes the proficiency percentage up. Crawling, standing, walking, laughing, getting angry, speaking, reading, every one of them counted. Every day of my 2nd and 3rd years I was learning or on my way to it. This produced a strange phenomenon in the village. A toddler ran the length of Owa village every morning, looking into everything, with 2 adults trailing behind and never catching him. The consensus was that this child would grow into a spectacular troublemaker. Then I turned 2 and started reading, and once I started I read until the light went, and the lamp in the Kang family study stayed lit deep into the night. Everybody was puzzled and everybody was curious. One day, an elder leaned on his seniority to test the reading toddler, and walked away with nothing to say. After it, the name of the Owa village prodigy traveled further than I had any use for, and the title came with it. Prodigy grants comprehension ability plus 20, and local fame, which is a mixed blessing when your strategy is a low profile. My comprehension ability was 45 when the attribute unlocked, and equipping the title carried it to 65. I have no idea what that means against anybody else's number, only that things go into my head faster than they used to. Night Owl is what it sounds like, earned by staying up every night to grind proficiency. It sets me at 3 hours of sleep a day and raises learning efficiency by 10% between 10 at night and 2 in the morning. Had I studied like this the first time round, I would have tested into a national university instead of working 9 in the morning to 9 at night, 6 days a week. It took leaving school and getting beaten flat by the world before I understood what learning was worth. Reborn now, I would grind anyway, but the system draws me a progress bar, and a progress bar is the most motivating object ever invented. The problem is that I have finished every book in the house and learned everything the village is left to teach. What the past year of reading gave me is a general picture of this world, and the picture is not comforting. This is a cultivation world, thick with rumors of immortality and the Tao, and a few years back when I was still crawling, an immortal came through to test spiritual root aptitude. I know what such a world does to people who cannot fight, killing over treasures, beast tides breaking loose, demonic cultivators emptying whole cities. Without strength, you do not survive here, and the system needs time, so the plan is to keep my head down and do nothing reckless. Natural disasters and man-made ones both go wherever they please. Another year goes by and I am 5, and Owa village has run out of things to teach me, so learning has slowed to minor achievement at 20%. The year did hand me one new skill, and it is called farming. It came by accident. when I put my foot down on a pest while running through the paddies, and a year later it is still entry level. The experience channels are weeding, pest control, plowing, planting, and harvesting, which sounds generous until you remember who holds it. Nobody hands a plow to a 5-year-old, so my entire grind is walking the paddies, pulling weeds and killing insects. I assumed this quiet life would go on forever. It did not. A village meeting is called, and I go, and none of the adults object, which I put down to the title. The village chief stands on the platform, old enough that his voice does not carry, so the crowd goes quiet rather than miss anything. He thanks everyone for coming, and says the meeting concerns the tax adjustment issued by the new city lord. Then he gets as far as the words "this time, the taxes," and stops. His lips shake and he cannot finish the sentence, and the yard understands him anyway. He takes a long breath and says the taxes will rise by 50%. A big man in a straw hat is on his feet at once, demanding to know whether he heard wrong, and another asks how anyone is supposed to live under that. The previous city lord had been honest and cut taxes several times, and all those cuts together came to about 20%. This leaves us 30% worse off than before any of it started. I was not born under those older numbers, but the old men described them well enough. They worked dawn to dusk, barely fed themselves, and no household dared have a child, because none could afford to raise one. We are going back to that, except heavier. The village chief tries to quiet everyone and gets nowhere, because the news is too bad to be quieted. My father tells my mother to take me home ahead of him, calling her "Seol the way he does when the news is bad. My parents gave up on instructions, which is what a child sensible from birth earns. I tell him to come back early and put a little sugar in the way I say it, because otherwise the two of them start treating me like a household deity. Having grown up an orphan the first time round, I am not too proud to enjoy being fussed over. He rubs my head, promises he will be back soon, and says he will bring me another book from the city. My father loves me because I am clever and easy to raise, and because I sometimes say things that sound profound and then turn out to make sense. He's decided the restoration of the Kang family's glory may rest on me. I thank him, and my eyes go to the word book, and the rest of my head goes to farming. Dawn. I am out inspecting the family paddy the way I do every morning. The rice reads growth 26% and health 95%, and when I go looking for work, markers for pests and weeds light up across the field. I run them down one at a time, and when I check again, the health reads a full 100% and farming ticks up. Keep the health at maximum and the harvest should be enormous. Left alone, pests and weeds can eat half a harvest, so every household takes them seriously, and every household still misses the small ones. Appraisal is the reason I do not, since it reads anything connected to a skill on my panel, and farming has made it read paddies. Most of the other families' fields sit between 70 and 80% health, with very few above 80. By harvest, their yield will run about 20% under ours, and that is not a small thing. Even after the 50% tax rise, our household should come out with a surplus. The village chief's door opens, and the meeting comes out of it, yawning and gray-faced, having sat in there all night. I find my father in the crowd and ask how it went. His face is exhausted and his expression grim, and when he sees me, he still finds a stiff smile, opens his arms and picks me up. He tells me not to worry, that however big the problem is, he will handle it, and that we should go home for porridge. 2 lifetimes have taught me what a forced smile looks like, and every man walking out of that yard is carrying the same weight badly. So I decide to help, which is convenient, since helping is also how I level farming. The better reason is that if only the Kang family brings in a bumper harvest, we become the most interesting household in the province. If everybody does, then heaven and earth get the thanks and nobody looks at us twice. I finish my porridge, leave my mother to her sewing, and run for the fields. Somebody yells brother ran behind me, out of breath, and I stop. It is Kang Gi, my uncle's son, built like a small ox and a head taller than me despite being born the same year. He wants to know what we are playing today, and then his face falls, because Manju has to sit with her mother and learn embroidery. Children in this world are alarmingly precocious. I tell him there is no playing today and that I am helping my father with the farm work, and I keep walking while I say it. He hurries after me and argues that we are too small to be any use, since he wants somebody to play with. I tell him something big is happening, and that small as we are, weeding and catching pests beats another morning of games. He gives in because he has never once won an argument with me. Then he works out that if he comes home having worked beside me, his father might hand over pocket money, and his enthusiasm arrives all at once. He breaks into a jog, waving at me to hurry so we can go earn money. A plump boy in silk steps into the road ahead of us, with 2 others behind him, one tall and one short. He asks whether the Owa village prodigy is in a hurry, and whether the prodigy has wet his pants. Kang Gi tells him it is none of his business and to move, because we are busy earning money. That gets him interested, and he offers, as young Master Lee Mun, to advise us, while his hangers-on chime in that old Master Lee is a famous wealthy man. This little tub of lard is Lee Moon, 8 years old, son of Lee Bugui, the village landlord and richest man in Owa village. He came into his money in middle age, and apart from caring about face, he is not a bad sort. At festivals, he feeds the whole village out of his own pocket. The one exception is my family, because he and my father cannot pass each other without a quarrel, and the reason is apparently my mother. Village melodrama, and I have inherited it. Lee Mun picks fights with me over it, and because I never bothered to respond, he has concluded that I am afraid of him. I tell him we are off to help with the family work, that something big has happened, and that small as we are, we can still contribute our meager share. Then I add that, unlike him, Lee Gaedong is out here idling with no heart at all. The name lands where I aimed it, and he goes red and shouts that he has changed his name and that I am to call him Young Master Lee Mun. Then he informs me his father has gone to see the city lord, that it will be settled shortly, and demands to know how my family plans to thank his. He wants me on my knees, or he will see to it that my family pays more tax, and his lackey repeats every word. If the tax could be settled that easily, I would take it gladly, so I ask whether it is actually solved. He says his father only left today and is expected back tonight, and that a famous rich man means there is no problem. For one hopeful second I thought the thing was done, and the man has not even arrived. My honest guess is that he cannot do it, since he is rich inside Owa village and nowhere else, and the new city lord has no connection to him. That is a judgment made on the information I have, and if I am wrong and he fixes it, nobody will be happier than me. Until then the plan stands, so I go around him and keep running for the fields. Lee Mun is still imagining my apology when a breeze goes past, and by the time he turns around we are small in the distance. One of his lackeys asks whether they should give chase. He tells them to chase nothing, since they will wait for his father's good news, and then he will sit at home until Kang Ran comes begging. Both lackeys tell him he is brilliant, and he feels wonderful about the entire exchange. Kang Gi and I reach the fields with everybody already at work and a fair number still yawning. Second Uncle Kang Kwang straightens up to rest his back, sees us, and waves us off, saying the adults have no time to mind children. I greet him properly and tell him we came to help. He shoos us harder, wanting to know what a 5-year-old can do, and says that clever as I am, this is physical labor. If we slip into the mud, he adds, our mothers will smack our backsides red. Kang Guang is an honest man who never married after some old heartbreak. He likes children and never returns from town without candy, the most popular adult in the village. I tell him we can look for bugs, and that my eyes are sharp, and Kangi announces he can see the little flying insects even at night. Then we comb his field to prove it, and my second uncle, who has carried the tax on his shoulders since last night, feels the weight shift. He calls us a pair of rascals and decides to stand watch, which gives him a rest after a night with no sleep. I call him over. I have found a bug nest. He is startled, since he checks his field carefully every day, and he bends down, and there they are, black specks packed dense along the rice roots. He deals with them fast and tells the Ranboy he has been a great help. And then Kangi finds some too and shouts for him. Bringing Kangi along was the right call. Alone I would have been far too visible. I steered into that patch on purpose, since the nests there were thick and anybody searching carefully was going to find them, so we cover more ground and split the credit. Reading it too can be filed under early intelligence, but finding insects as though I can see through soil cannot be filed anywhere. With somebody sharing the work, the most anybody will conclude is that children have sharp eyes. Then a chime tells me that teaching Kangi to remove bugs has activated the teaching skill. An unexpected bonus. I had been quietly anxious about whether directing somebody else would count, and the answer is yes. The system pays less than doing the work myself, but far more than nothing, and the help speeds things up. Pointing at bugs counts as teaching, and teaching feeds a second bar. 2 birds, 1 field. So 1 man and 2 children work the paddies through the morning. The obvious pests I hand to second uncle, and the ones that have not shown themselves I quietly wipe out where nobody is looking. By noon, my second uncle's field is essentially clean, with health reading 91%, up from 78. Farming reads entry level at 23% and teaching entry level at 5%, so farming alone jumped 6 points in a morning. If I sweep every field in the village, I might push farming into the next stage, and logically the reward should touch planting somehow. My gains are not only on the panel, because at noon second uncle digs out his treasured jerky and feeds us properly. Meat in this village is a New Year food, and only in the last few good years at that. Before those years, nobody here got so much as a smell of it. That evening, Lee Bugwee comes home carrying the hopes of the entire village, and what he sets down is not hope. The despair goes back around the yard like a past bowl, and even Lee Mun stops coming outside, which is a shame after all that boasting. The villagers answer the only way they know, rising earlier and working later, chasing any extra grain the season will give. In all that heaviness, 3 children on the field ridges are the only thing anybody smiles at. Kang Gi announces that the bug-catching squad is moving out. With actual blood in his voice, and Manju falls in behind him with a small cheer. I raise a hand without much conviction, because I have tasted the benefits and have therefore recruited the girl I play with most. Manju is a year older than the two of us, and carries none of the authority that should come with it. She is gentle and painfully shy, and her father died when she was small, so her mother raised her alone, and she is thin and sallow enough that people wince. My family has never been able to stand it and has helped them for years, which is how the three of us ended up together. We move fast, cutting between the patties all morning, and the adults around us catch it like weather. The children are wearing themselves out, so what excuse does a grown man have? Maybe with a little more effort this year can still be survived. It is not wishful thinking, because with the nests we are turning up, everybody now estimates this year's harvest at 10% above normal. 10% is the difference between a hard year and an impossible one. A month goes by. August turns thick and sticky, and the heat has flattened Kangi and Manju into deeply unenthusiastic insect hunters. Kangi fans himself with his straw hat and asks whether we are still looking for bugs, since they get harder to find and it is unbearably hot. I tell them both to go home without me, then ask Kangi whether his father is not still sick and should be helping at home. He thinks about it and decides he would rather stay out here with me. When a man's luck turns, even the meat gets stuck in his teeth. Kangi's father came to Oha village as a wanderer. His home village was struck by an evil spirit and almost nobody survived. And although an immortal destroyed the thing later, the dead stayed dead. He arrived with a decent blacksmith's hands, married one of my father's younger sisters, and became my uncle. It was a marriage into our house rather than out of it, back when the Kang family still counted for something. Years ago, they opened a smithy in the city. Business was good, and they cleared the debt the year before last. Then he fell ill half a month ago and has not left the bed since, and every coin they saved has gone into it. The house has been in tears for weeks, and Kangi cannot stand it, so he runs to mine daily. Birth, aging, sickness, and death, the four sufferings, and immortal has no answer to any of them, which is precisely why I am going to cultivate. If immortality is beyond me, then at the very least my family will never worry about food or clothing again, and the hope for all of it sits on my panel. The name reads Kang Ran, and the title line reads Prodigy, currently equipped with Night Owl behind it. Lifespan reads 5 against a maximum of 78, comprehension ability holds at 65, and appraisal is still max level. Learning is crept to minor achievement at 28%, teaching sits at entry level at 23, and farming is climbed to entry level at 98. A month of catching bugs and pulling weeds, shot farming upward, and it is about to turn over. The problem with pests and weeds is that one day you run out of them. The bar used to jump a dozen points in a day, and lately it manages 1 point in 2 days. Teaching has stalled outright, and its judgment mechanism is genuinely strange, since directing Kangi 10 times might pay 8 points while directing Munju 10 times pays 1. My working theory is that once a person has learned the thing, teaching it again stops counting. If that is true, then only one conclusion is available to me. Kangi is considerably slower than Munju. A neighbor calls the bug-catching squad over to check his rows, promising a meal if we find anything, and the other two are in before he finishes. I read health 94% off it, which means those two will find precisely nothing today. I keep that to myself, walk in quietly, and go looking for the hidden burrows, so I can destroy them for experience. Harvest is a month or two out. The patties have begun to yellow, and the older farmers can see that barring an accident, this will be a bumper year. People have started remembering the 3 little ones who spent a month turning up nests nobody else had found, and the village settled on the explanation that children have bright eyes. We are the favorites now, first in line whenever a household has something good to eat, and the other two have let it go to their heads. The sun goes down. Farming reads 99%, which should turn over tomorrow or the day after. The moment I am through the door, I smell chicken soup, and my mouth waters before my brain points out that today is not a festival. Then I work it out, since the soup is from my uncle, and my expectations fold themselves up and put themselves away. I run to the kitchen and tell them it smells wonderful, and my father says the chicken is being stewed from my uncle. It was our own hen, one that had stopped laying, meant for the end of the year, but my uncle's illness turned serious. He says Kangi's mother is pitiful too, and that we have to help, and he sighs from deep in his chest. Then he remembers the candy my second uncle dropped off for me and asks how the day went. He knows exactly what I have been doing out there, and it has moved him more than he lets on. I tell him there were no results and that the fields are basically clean. It is not the right thing to be disappointed about, but I want that level up. He sees a child looking downcast and tells me I have done very well, and that thanks to us everybody is breathing easier. He also tells me to go along with my mother because my uncle will never manage the whole pot and will share some with me and Gia. Since I arrived in this world, everything has been fine except the near total absence of meat in my life. I am going to cultivate into an immortal, and somewhere along that road there had better be meat-eating freedom. My uncle is lying in bed, coughing now and then, otherwise ordinary except that he has been reduced by half. A month ago the man was a wall, and now he looks like a scholar who has never lifted a brush. The doctor called it an old ailment that has taken root and eaten his foundation, and said curing it would take immortal medicine. I would give a great deal to point appraisal at him, except that it only reads things attached to a skill on my panel. Perhaps I should learn medicine, and I will ask my second uncle next time he goes into the city. In the meantime, I get my share of the chicken, which I have waited on for what feels like a lifetime. 2 days later, I pull my hand out of the mud with the last insect pinched between my fingers, and the chime finally arrives. Farming has upgraded to minor achievement and delivered a branch ability called mutation. Not a harvest bonus at all then. What in the world is mutation? The system says it gives crops a 5% chance to undergo changes, and then I look up and the world fills with text. Information unpacks across every field in sight, dense and layered, and it genuinely rattles me. I go through it one entry at a time. Mutated rice that will not bear fruit at 9%. Mutated rice whose grain is poisonous at 10. Mutated rice with its yield cut in half at 2. What possible use is any of this to me? Good heavens, have I just ruined every field in the village? The saving grace is that the probability is low, and a whole field carries only a few such plants, so quietly removing them is no trouble. I get to work destroying the worst, the ones that cause constipation, the ones that poison, and one strain apparently developing a taste for biting people. Better still, these are only tendencies toward mutation, each with a progress bar, and nothing becomes the new thing until the bar fills. Those bars creep upward on their own, faster as my farming climbs. And in the middle of all that weeding out, some genuinely interesting things happened. Blood spirit rice, a low-grade first-order spiritual rice, nurtured on blood meal, and eating it increases physical strength at 1%. 100 fragrance rice, which after husking throws off a scent that draws insects and wild beasts at 2%. High-yield rice, yield increased by 10% at 11%. I named all three myself, and they are far and away the biggest thing this level up has handed me. The blood spirit rice is the one that stops my heart, because it is crossed into spiritual rice. I know what that is from my reading, since it is the grain the immortals eat and it carries spiritual energy inside the husk. For a mortal body, it does not grant power so much as strengthen the frame. Pair it with 100 fragrance rice and the combination gets close to perfect. The only question left is whether spiritual rice can be grown in the mortal realm, and there is one way to find out. Summer leaves and the patties turn into one enormous sheet of gold. The village has not seen a harvest like it, and for a few days the noise is almost cheerful. Then the arithmetic starts. Somebody says it is a pity the tax is 50% higher, and somebody else says belts will have to be tightened anyway. A third man says our village is still doing well, that elsewhere people have gone off to be bandits, and warns everyone about the road to the city. That last remark trails off into murmurs, and everybody understands the part he did not say. A great harvest, an uncertain market next year, but this year at least nobody starved, and the heaviness in the village loosens a notch. Corrupt officials, every last one of them. I had planned to go into the city and learn medicine over the slack season. Now the roads are thick with bandits, and if my uncle will not risk the trip, a small boy certainly cannot, and Lee Bugwee has canceled the annual village party. I get home to shouting. My father is calling my mother a spendthrift woman, saying the family can barely feed itself and she has taken in a child on top of that. My mother fires back that her elder brother knelt and begged her, that he split his forehead open kowtowing, and asks what she was supposed to do. Watch. My father says that even so she should not have agreed, and that now nobody will have enough to eat. I go through the door fast. The scene inside is a mess, with my father on a stool, face set hard and sweat all over him, 2 sacks of freshly husked rice beside him. My mother is silent and holding a small girl against her, and the girl is dark and thin with tear tracks down her face. My mother's elder brother is my uncle on that side, which makes the girl my cousin, and their harvest was bad this year. Word reached them that Oha village did well, so they sent her to us. My father is only talking, since the thing is done and he has agreed to it by staying in his chair. We eat that night without a word passing between us. What exactly is a child supposed to say to that? In fairness, the family is nowhere near as tight as my father claimed, because our land is our land and I have taken particular care of it. If everybody else had a good harvest, ours was outstanding, and my father simply wants a reserve against next year. He tells the whole village we are struggling, and tells my mother the same, and the only person he cannot fool is me. Late last night he carried part of our rice over to my uncle's house without a word, and when the two families husked together this morning nobody noticed. My uncle is no better. He sold his land to open a smithy, which has no business now, and what is left is whatever savings the illness has not eaten. Kengi has been out of sight for a while, since his father has him shut in at home learning the trade, so I went straight over and learned it alongside him. Sure enough, a new skill woke up. Not the medicine I was after, but forging at entry level. 15%. I plan to make this my winter project, and afterward I can teach it to King G and farm teaching experience off my cousin. He is a slow learner, which drives my uncle to distraction. So whatever I learn, I turn around and patiently pour into King Gi. My uncle praises me as kind-hearted and likes his nephew considerably more than before, and I am satisfied with King Gi's comprehension exactly as it stands. By spring, I intend to ask for a small plot of my own to work, planting 100 fragrance rice and high-yield rice together with the blood spirit rice well apart from both. In the last days of the season, all three finished mutating. The 100 fragrance and the high yield look like ordinary rice from the outside, and only after husking does the 100 fragrance give off that strange perfume. The blood spirit rice changed visibly, its gold turning orange-red, and husked it carries a distinct smell of blood. There is little of it, and all of it goes back into the ground as seed, so I have not tasted it. Next year will be better, and I go to sleep believing it. An ordinary and eventful year closes out, and I turn 6. It is the new year, and this one feels particularly bleak. The family has a new member. Her name is Hiyosomi, and she is 5. My father lost that argument and was never going to keep chewing on it, so he has been gentle with her since. The first meeting was too fierce, though, and she is not warm to him, whereas she decided early that she liked me. From then on, I have a small shadow that goes everywhere I go. Our stores are not critical, but I like to plan ahead, and there is nothing to do in winter except sleep. So I decide to open a new income stream, and I bring out the 100 fragrance rice. Every animal on the mountain is asleep. The lake is not. I have been wondering whether a fishing skill is waiting in that water, and the thought has me more excited than a 6-year-old should look. I take my small shadow down to Owa Lake, named after the village the way everything here is. It is fed by living water, so it holds plenty of fish and shrimp. I pick an unoccupied spot, sit Somi down, and start chipping at the ice. Then give it up, since I am too small to get through. A villager passing by asks whether the child prodigy needs a hand. The insect-catching team the 3 little ones ran last year earned a lot of goodwill, and Wang the First was one of the men who benefited. I call him Uncle Wang and ask him to cut me a hole so I can fish. He points out that it is the dead of winter, asks where I imagine I will find a fish, and says nobody in living memory has fished this lake in winter. Then he takes the tool out of my hands and opens a hole of very sensible size. I thank him with a proper bow, and he waves it off and walks on, satisfied that the hole is too small to fall through. Once nobody is in sight, I take out a small bottle and tip a little 100 fragrance rice into my palm. The smell comes off it immediately, and even Somi, who barely speaks, keeps leaning in to sniff until her stomach growls loudly enough to hear. The little girl goes scarlet and I laugh out loud. I ask her who told her to eat one small bowl at breakfast and tell her to eat more from now on. Then I thread 2 or 3 grains onto the hook. She says in pieces that she does not dare eat too much, because she is afraid my father will send her away. His face on that first day did its damage. I mess up her hair and tell her not to worry, since the village had a huge harvest, and one more mouth is nothing. I remind her that when we haul up a big fish, there will be soup and meat, and she will have earned her share. She looks up and asks very carefully whether that is true. I tell her yes and give her the job of watching the hook, to speak the moment it moves. On my own, I do not have the strength, but with 2 of us we can land something big, and the credit is hers as much as mine. She nods over and over and tells me she will do her best, calling me Brother Ran while she says it. I scatter a handful of rice into the hole to build a fishing nest, then tie the line onto a bamboo pole and drop it in. We sit down on 2 small stools to wait. I made those stools myself, since forging has made my hands more dexterous, and a folding stool is nothing next to what I remember from my old life. They are popular here now since the design is simple enough to copy after watching it made a few times. Every household owns one and people carry them from house to house and sit talking all day. Somi says the hook is moving. I had expected to sit here half the morning. The bamboo pole comes up heavy, alarmingly heavy, and without the strength forging put into my arms I would have gone into the water. Somi grabs the line ahead of me and hauls with everything she has, and 2 children pulling together are much stronger than one. We heave at it like a tug-of-war team until the thing comes up, and it really is a big one. More fish keep coming out of the hole behind it, flopping across the ice until the water runs off them and they lie still. A chime tells me I have learned fishing. Called it. My father's voice comes across the ice, shouting for Rana and Somi, and he arrives complaining that if Wang the First had not told him he would never have known. Then he stops mid-sentence, looking at the fish on the pole and the others scattered around us. He asks whether we really can catch fish in winter, and whether they are not supposed to be sleeping. The villagers know animals sleep through the cold, but none has ever seen a winter fish. News does not travel to a place like this, and if nobody tries a thing, the village can go centuries without learning it. I tell my father to hurry up and help, since this is enough to feed us for a while. He hooks the fish onto the line, swings the pole over his shoulder, and walks back into the village like a returning general. Winter fishing is a real discovery in Oha village. The discoverer is his own son, and he does not intend for anybody to miss either fact. He swaggers home telling everyone he passes, while Somi and I follow behind, thinking about hot fish soup. The moment the village sees a full string of fish, people come over to ask, and my father speaks humbly and sounds insufferably proud, broadcasting his son's great feat into every ear available. From that winter on, everybody is out on the ice cutting holes in it. Whether it is because nobody had tried before or because the lake is genuinely stuffed with fish, almost everyone comes home with a haul. With fish soup on the table, the winter turns much easier, and the first thing anybody says on meeting anybody now is, "How many did you catch today?" I go out a few times myself, and the villagers crowd me for advice, asking whether a spot is good and what bait the little divine child is using. I hand out small tips. What I never bring out again is the 100 fragrance rice, because there are far too many eyes on that ice. The stuff is miraculous, so I will grow it and eat it myself, and perhaps make it public one day when nobody can take it from me. The high-yield rice I simply mix into the family seed pile, since nobody can tell them apart. The 100 fragrance I breed quietly in the plot I marked out. My father backed me and built the fence himself, because he wants to see what his genius son produces next. The rest of my time goes to my uncle's house, learning forging and teaching it back to Kangi. Every so often I walk to the lake and drop a line in for fishing. Winter ends, spring comes in, and the whole valley wakes up. The villagers soak the seed until it germinates, scatter it into the beds, and let it come on for a month before transplanting the seedlings. The early steps are manageable. Setting the seedlings very nearly finished me, because even on a small plot it means bending double several hundred times a day. There is a saying about every grain being hard-earned, and I never once felt it in my old life. I feel it now, from the small of my back outward. I cut no corners anyway, following my father exactly, since these are the methods handed down by the old ancestors, and they are the most reliable available here. I knew better farming techniques in my previous life, in the sense that I had heard of them, and I remain a beginner. After a year of weeding and pest control, I might qualify as a great master of insects. Then again, appraisal is doing that work, and anybody holding appraisal could be a great master of insects. Spring runs out and summer comes in, and against the white of winter and the gold of autumn, the endless green is its own beauty. My exclusive little plot has a vitality the rest of the valley does not. I check it morning, noon, and night, and I will not sleep until it reads health 100%. From July, it is rice management season, which means pests and weeds and very little else. The pest catching squad mobilizes again with one more member, and that would be Hio Somi. The 3 little ones have become the 4 little ones, still hunting the paddies for anything that eats rice, and still the most cheerful thing the adults have to look at. I lie under a big tree with a stalk of grass in my teeth and run my eyes down the panel. The name reads Kang Ran, and the title line has changed since Divine Child is now equipped, with Night Owl and Father of Winter Fishing behind it. Lifespan reads 6 against 78, comprehension ability holds at 65, and appraisal is still parked at max level. Learning has reached minor achievement at 56%, teaching entry level at 77, and farming minor achievement at 88 with mutation as a branch ability. Forging reads entry level at 73%, and fishing entry level at 32. The older a person gets, the more he knows, and the less there is left to pick up, so learning has become hard to move. The winter's real winners were teaching and forging. On the forging side, I've taken in nearly all the theory. My body is the ceiling, since a child who cannot work iron has few ways to earn experience. Farming climbed hard, which tracks how much of the work I did with my own hands, and it should turn over once the crop is harvested and the cycle closes. Something strange did happen this season, when a man went to another province to visit relatives and was robbed on the road. The robbers had some limits at least, taking the money and leaving him breathing, and after that nobody wants to travel. We live off the mountain here, so daily life holds together, but every road out of the valley has gone quiet. People wonder aloud when the world is going to get better, and somebody points out that the Immortal Master never came to test spiritual roots this year. The testing runs once every 5 years, and 5 years ago, when I was 1, an Immortal Master did come through Owa village, and nobody here qualified. Now the talk is that they have given up on us, which is not unreasonable, since the village has come up empty several cycles running. I have been looking forward to that test more than anything in this short life, because I have no idea whether I have a spiritual root at all. Surely my luck is not that bad. Give me a spiritual root, even a low grade 1, and I will take it and say thank you. With the system behind me, the moment I can cultivate, I am confident I can grind the thing upward, and without 1, I am finished before I start. A drop of rain lands on my face. I look up at a sky that went black with cloud while I was busy praying at it. The squad shouts across the field for Brother Rand to run, and I am up and moving inside a second. The rain has no respect for anybody's face and comes down all at once, and the four of us get 5 steps before it soaks us through. I shout for everybody to come to my house, since mine is closest, and the 4 little ones sprint the rest of the way through the downpour. My mother is already in the doorway watching for us, and she takes all 4 inside, changes them and dries them off. She is barely finished when my father comes in drenched, saying he has not seen rain like this in years. Cleaned up, he sits on a small stool watching the water come down, and lets out a long breath. My mother is cheerful, saying the muggy days are over, and the crops will not need watering tomorrow, and I hear her thinking about a day with the family home. My father does not look cheerful at all, and says he hopes the rain stops tomorrow. I ask whether he is worried the crops will drown if this goes on too long. My mother catches up with the possibility a second later, and the pleasure goes out of her face. My father shakes his head and says nobody knows, then tells me to sleep properly, because tomorrow we may be pumping water out in the rain. When a rice paddy takes rain like this, the water has to come out, or the crop drowns and the yield collapses. The rain does not stop. My father and I go out in straw cloaks and bamboo hats, while Somi stays home with my mother to mend and patch. The water has already come over the top, and by village standards we are late, since half of Owa village is out there bailing with buckets and basins. Some are gasping already, having started before dawn, and the level has barely moved, since the rain has not let up, and human arms only do so much. We are hurrying past when a man throws his basin down, drops onto his knees in the mud and shouts at the sky. He asks heaven why it is doing this, and whether rain like this is meant to kill him outright, and then he breaks down. It moves through the field like a sickness, and one by one the people around him stop. Some stand like walking corpses, some weep into muddy hands, and others refuse to quit and scoop harder than before. I ask my father whether scooping is the only option. He says our land is poor, pumping tools are beyond us, and no immortal master lives here, so this is all anybody can do. I tell him the efficiency is hopeless, and ask about drainage ditches, and he says the ditches are useless against a downpour this size. Then he hands me a basin and says, everything we save is saved. Our own land reads health 53%, and the number is still moving. This will not do at all. Without a pump, we cannot save it. And the moment I put the word pump into my head, something from my previous life comes back. There was an old contraption in my grandmother's house, a long pipe with a gear at either end. Turning the gears drove a chain of little wooden paddles up the inside, pushing water ahead of them and out the top. Turn it fast with a decent seal and it beats a man with a basin. I shout to my father that I read about a water pump in a book, and that I am going to build one. He half hears it and asks what, so I come closer and explain the idea properly. He hesitates and asks whether it can really work, and I tell him we have to try. He is to gather everybody and get wood ready while I find my uncle, and I run off without waiting for an answer. Behind me, he complains that the child did not explain properly, then works out that the answer is wood. With the water still rising, he starts pulling villagers together to cut and haul. Everyone already knew scooping was hopeless, and now they remember whose son is doing the asking and what the village calls him. It gives them something to stand on, and the answer is one. Men with lumber going back for it, and men with axes following the rest out to the trees. At my uncle's house, he and Kangi are already in cloaks, and Kangi says they were coming to help me bale. I tell him baling will not do much and that I am making a water pump instead. Then go inside, take pen and paper, and start drawing. Forging has improved my hand enough that the blueprint comes out clean. Yun Myung-seng watches it take shape and understands before I am halfway, since he is a real craftsman and the principle is simple once seen. It is only that nobody here had ever thought of it. My uncle stopped being surprised by this nephew long ago, since I keep producing objects out of nowhere, folding stools included. A crew of big men arrives in the courtyard hauling timber, and he starts directing traffic at once. I finish the blueprint and come out to a loud yard with several parts already cut. I ask whether they really started before I finished, and whether he understood it that fast. He laughs and tells little Ran not to underestimate a man who has spent half his life with wood and iron, and asks for the blueprint to make directing easier. With a drawing to point at and that much manpower, the pump is finished in under an hour. Everyone stands around the strange object looking unconvinced, though the older hands are already seeing what it does. We carry it out to our field, and though the rain has fallen a full day, not one person leaves. They stand in it watching us tinker while more arrive as the news spreads. Wang the first comes running and finds the machine with one end in the paddy and the other in a reservoir dug ready beside it. My father takes the handles in both hands and the wooden paddles begin to turn. Somebody shouts that water is coming out, that there is so much of it, and that it is fast. The water comes out of that pipe like a floodgate opening, and before long the level is back where it belongs. People are calling it miraculous, saying it is better than the one they saw in the city, saying the crops are saved. Then the field falls apart in the good way. Grown men weep and hold on to each other, and several go down on their knees in front of my father and me, sobbing their thanks until we get them back up. Once everyone is calm, my father sends word to the rest of the village to build pumps through the night, because one pump is nothing against this much water. The second job is the drainage ditches, which existed and were never much use, since flat ground meant water gathered faster than they could carry it away. With pumps, every field near the lake throws its water straight into the lake, and the inner fields drain the ordinary way. 2 days pass. The rain still has not stopped, and along the river a row of water pumps turns without pause, worked in shifts, so none of them ever stops. A disaster that should have gutted us gets beaten by everybody pulling together. My panel has been busy through all of it since forging reached minor achievement at 2% and paid out a branch ability called success rate plus 5%. That one baffles me completely. Useless as it is, the level up taught me how to move forging quickly, invent a thing that does not exist yet, put it into people's hands, and the experience pours in. Teaching improved a little and no more, probably because the pump is simple enough that everyone understood it at a glance. The genuine surprise is farming, which jumped to major achievement at 3% and handed me a second branch ability. Harvest plus 10%. Apparently bailing water to save a crop counts the same as pest control, and with this much rice drowned the timing could not be better. After the rain there is a rainbow across the whole valley. Nobody is in the mood for it. I walk the fields reading numbers. 56%, 65%, 78%, and that last one is ours. We got the water off in time and it still could not hold above 80, and it will not climb, because the pests and weeds are gone and the number has stopped. A fifth of the rice drowned, which puts this harvest about 20% under last year's. People ask whether the government has said anything about cutting this year's tax. Nobody knows, because the roads are full of bandits, and the city is a long way off. Somebody has heard that Lee Bugwe came back with men and fresh news, since his family can still hire an armed escort. That makes him the only man in Oha village who travels regularly. The next day his news goes around, and the news is that taxes will not be reduced. The reaction is immediate and ugly. Men curse the officials for trying to force farmers into their graves and ask whether they cannot see the rain. One says he is done, that he will go and be a bandit himself, and asks what road is left for a farmer. Nobody is working, because nobody has the heart for it. By every precedent, a disaster this size means the tax gets reduced or cancelled, since keeping farmers fed is the only thing that prevents a rising. The city lord of Cheonsu City has decided otherwise. Owa village at least has the water pump, so a cancelled tax might even give us a good year, and a reduction would leave us a way through. Other villages have nothing like that, and whole households are being wiped out. Men are taking up axes and going into the mountains to swear brotherhood with each other. Above all of this stand the immortals, who call up wind and rain, who feel neither pain nor illness, and who live spans a mortal cannot picture. Every dynasty sits under the hand of one immortal power or another, so most behave themselves, and mortals are the soil that cultivators grow out of. But the immortal master who should have appraised spiritual roots never arrived, and the dynasty is acting as though nobody is watching. The rumor in the village has found its shape, and the shape is that the immortals have abandoned this place. Sects destroy each other over resources constantly, and a ruined sect gets a line in somebody's record while the mortals under it get nothing. When a dynasty rots, the officials with connections leave first, and everybody else scatters or waits for new immortals to rebuild it. 10 years is fast work for an immortal, and a whole generation for a mortal. I know all this because I read a great deal, thanks to the loose cultivators out there, not strong but chivalrous, who write their travels down for ordinary people to read. Then word goes around that Lee Bugwe intends to hand out grain, and that the details are being discussed at the village chief's house. The whole crowd sets off at a run, and I go with them. He stands on the platform wearing a sorrowful expression, and says he has decided to help, but that the specifics must be clear, so nobody sits at home waiting to be carried. A household slightly short can come to him for the difference, and where the shortfall is large, the land gets inspected and a patrol team judges how hard they work. If a family has worked and truly has no other road left, then grain gets released to cover the tax once the villagers approve. Any grain left after the taxes goes to a porridge station at the village entrance. He sips his tea and asks whether there are questions. The yard answers with one voice that his decision is correct and that a village with a man like Bugwe is blessed. Then somebody asks what should be done about Kang Jeon's household. The answer comes back that nothing can be done except send a few gifts, and that from now on it would be wise to keep some distance. My face goes very still, because when my family came up most of them said nothing, and silence in a crowd like that is a decision. Everyone knows Lee Bugwe and my father cannot stand each other, and in the past that cost nobody anything. This year every household will eat out of his hand, and once you have taken a man's hand you owe him, so taking his help means drawing a line against his enemy. He never asked them to isolate us, and he did not have to. I run home and pass several women leaving our door with their faces half covered. Inside there are eggs, cloth, and other gifts piled up, and my mother is thanking them with a smile that has nothing behind it. One of them says it is not that her auntie is heartless, only that they have to live too, and leaves the gifts as thanks for the water pump. Another suggests that Seola might ask her husband to humble himself before Master Lee, since face matters less than survival. My mother holds the stiff smile and says nothing to either of them. The moment the door shuts, her face goes dark. She calls them a pack of ungrateful wretches, points out that Lee Bugwi never asked for any of this, and asks who they think they are performing for. I call to her from the doorway and she jumps, then puts the smile back on and says the villagers brought all these gifts to thank Rana for the water pump. She offers to steam eggs tonight with a little minced meat over the top. For days everyone praised her for raising a good son, and today it all turned over in one afternoon, and she has no idea how we are to live here now. I tell her, in my best small child voice, that if they want to break off the loss is theirs, since I am clever and still have treasures I have not brought out. That last part is not a performance. Being frozen out may turn out to be the best thing that has happened to this family. She takes it as a child comforting his mother, though it clearly touches her, and then she calls Somi in and the three of us put the gifts away. When my father hears, he tells Somi and me to stay in and play at home. 5 or 6 days of being frozen out. I use them to watch my own fields, and almost nobody comes near since our land sits in the corner nearest the mountain and is not on the way anywhere. People with good relations used to wander over to chat, and now the whole village walks the long way around. Partly that is Lee Bugwi's opinion doing its work, and partly it is that they know what they did was wrong and cannot look my father in the face. Being isolated turns out to have advantages, since with nobody watching this corner I can plant mutated rice at scale. The fields closest to the mountain are ours, and the ring outside belongs to my uncle. My own plot is the innermost acre, invisible unless a person walks right into it, and I picked that spot for this exact reason. Now I intend to convert the whole acre. It is going considerably worse for everybody standing near us. The village has split in two, one side led by Lee Bugwi and containing most of Owa village, a block that formed itself out of who takes his grain. The other side is whoever is on good terms with my family, which comes to my uncle's household, my second uncle, and Munju and her mother. Weak, few, and out on a limb, all of it comes back to strength, and a cultivator could scatter a downpour like the one that nearly drowned us, or knock a corrupt official off his chair. The last few weeks have set my determination as hard as it can set. The trouble is that the immortal Tao is difficult to find. The one road with hope on it was the spiritual root test, and the test did not come. So I look at what I actually have. My experimental plot is full of orange-red blood spirit rice, a low-grade spiritual rice standing thick and healthy, and my hope is riding on it. The remaining 100 fragrance rice has been moved outside the fence and mixed in with the ordinary crop. With the isolation, the squad has stopped running, which leaves me a great deal of time. Once my own fields and my uncle's are seen to, I sit under a big tree with a book and watch the paths, so anybody coming gives me warning. When the sun goes down, I head home, and where there used to be people calling out and stopping to talk, there are now backs turning and heads bending to the work. I get home to an argument, which is becoming a pattern. A woman is telling my mother that her auntie is not scolding her, only asking her to let Lee Bugwi sell the water pump so everyone can make money. My mother says that sounds lovely, asks whether it is not simply her family wanting the money, and suggests they go and do it themselves. The woman starts to say the thing was invented by little Ran after all, and does not get to finish. My mother wants to know whether she still remembers who made it, since when Lee Bugwi was hunting for a builder, this woman claimed she had made it herself. In that case, my mother says, go and make one, and stop coming here to ask. The woman draws herself up and says she is little Ran's aunt and a member of the Kang family, so there is nothing wrong with saying our family made it. My mother tells her to get out, calls her a shameless old hag, and informs her that little Ran does not have an aunt like her. Then she puts the woman through the door with both hands, spots me outside, and pulls me in. Auntie Kang curses at volume for a while, and when nobody inside reacts, she leaves, muttering down the lane. My aunt, apparently, who has looked down on this family since the day she married out, a snob who married well and never let anybody forget it. The rest of it fills itself in. Lee Bugwi found out the water pump existed and asked who could build one, offering to sell them and split the profit. Plenty of people had made a pump by then, and not one could explain why any part of it was shaped as it was. Everybody knew whose invention it was, and after the freeze-out they were too ashamed to profit off our design, which left an opening, and Auntie Kang walked straight into it. Lee Bugwi was delighted, asked her family for a sample, and rushed to the city to chase down channels. Her family, of course, cannot build the thing. She assumed a member of the Kang family could get the drawings out of me easily, and that a share in her opportunity would leave us grateful, which is how she came to be asking for the blueprint in our doorway and going back out of it backward. My father says flatly that evening that it is not worth the attention, and even her own older brother cannot stand her. Late at night, Oha village is pitch black. I go out dressed in black and head straight for the fields, and not ours. I cleared insects out of all of these before the storm, and farming, whenever I work a field with my own hands, carries that 5% chance of mutation. The failures are not worth talking about, but the useful ones, blood spirit rice among them, have come up in respectable numbers. Tonight there is something new in among them. Grain fasting rice, which holds more energy than ordinary grain and fills a person up far more easily. The description sits close enough to the grain fasting pills in the cultivation novels I read in my old life that I named it after them. My reason for being out here in the dark is to lift the good mutations out of other people's fields into mine and destroy the bad ones. My family has been frozen out, and I am not saintly enough to leave good things in the fields of the people who did it. Besides, these mutations only exist because of me, and 1 or 2 missing stalks nobody will notice. Finished at last. Thank you, Night Owl, because without 3 hours of sleep being enough, I would have been caught the first night out. More than half the acre in front of me is mutated rice now. I have pulled out everything that drowned, and transplanting has pushed the health back up. Mutated rice is stubbornly alive and survives even my extremely crude transplanting. During the storm, most of what drowned was ordinary rice, while most of the mutated rice came through standing. Health reads 100%, and getting that number back was not easy. This innermost acre is a completely different field than it was a month ago. The experimental corner is solid blood spirit rice, and outside the fence, the 100 fragrance, the high yield and the ordinary rice are mixed, with a stalk or 2 of grain fasting rice among them. With enough care, the ordinary rice will keep drifting into mutation, though good fortune and bad come up unpredictably. So all I can do is hope the good ones outnumber the rest. Somewhere further up this ladder, there had better be an ability that only mutates in the good direction, and I would very much like to get my hands on it. The days that followed settled into something close to peaceful. Mornings went to the fields, and afternoons to Uncle Yan Nyongsang's bench, learning forging. When the light went soft, I took the 4 little ones out to play games and taught them whatever I could make them sit still for. Learning had crawled to 95% and was leaning on the door of its next rung. I kept wondering what branch ability the breakthrough would hand me, since the system never gives me anything I can predict. That afternoon, I came back from walking the rice and found Kang Gi sprinting up the path with his face all wrong. He said Li Bugui had brought craftsmen up from the city and was taking my water pump apart to copy it, then hauled me toward the fields by the sleeve. Honestly, I did not care much. The principle was simple enough that a competent carpenter could reverse it in an afternoon, and in a world with no patent office, it was only a question of when. The thing had done its job, and it was a mortal realm toy anyway, since no immortal would stoop to peddling one. My eyes were on the Tao. A wooden pump was not going to be the hill I stood on. Unfortunately, not caring is a luxury only one person in a family gets to have. By the time we reached the river, a crowd had gathered on the bank and the copy was finished. Someone lowered it in, worked the treadle, and it drew exactly the way mine did. Li Bugui's face lit up as he promised heavy rewards, and the craftsman bowed and thanked him twice over. In this world, if you could make a thing, the thing was yours. My aunt Kang Yusu picked that moment to sidle up beside him, rubbing her hands and ask about her share. He snorted and asked whether she had the nerve to want money when he had not settled accounts for her lie. She protested that it was no lie, that the pump was her nephew's invention, and little Ran was a Kang. He told her there was no need for any of that now, since his people had copied it. Auntie Kang stood there working her jaw with no words coming out. Then my father came through the crowd at a run. He called Li Bugui shameless and said everyone knew whose son had built that pump, and there he stopped, because reason was on our side and nothing else was. Li Bugui sneered and swept a hand at the crowd, inviting him to ask them. My father turned and looked, and every villager found somewhere else to put their eyes. They were counting on Li Bugui's grain to survive winter, and justice was not worth losing that. My father's gaze went hard while everything behind it sank. If his grandfather had still been alive, this crowd would have been falling over each other to flatter him. Li Bugui spread his arms and told the village to look, since nobody was standing up. From that day on, he announced, the water pump was a Li family invention, and anyone who said otherwise was talking nonsense. He laughed, thinking that Kang Jian still had not learned the only lesson that matters, which is that strength decides these things and justice never has. Kang Gi and I had come up just in time to watch all of it. I looked at my father facing a whole village alone, and something in my chest went tight and cold. Before today, I had held nothing against the Li family, and had mostly admired how the man operated, since only his fat son Li Mun annoyed me. That ended in one afternoon. He was a small man with a large house, and every villager studying his own shoes was an accomplice. I understood why they did it, and understanding has never once been the same thing as forgiving. Their hero, my enemy. Days are long and the years are many, and nobody here has any idea what the Kang family is going to become. I took my father's hand and told him we were going home, and we turned our backs on all of them. His hand shook the whole way. He told me in a low voice that I had to work hard from now on, because without strength a man cannot protect anything, and with strength he can take whatever he wants. The first sentence was the shape of his life, and the second was everything he hoped I would make of mine. I told him I understood, and meant it more literally than he could know. 2 or 3 more years would do it. The best answer to people like this is to live better than they do and drag everyone I care about up with me until they understand what they walked away from. Regret eats hardest when the opportunity was one they could have taken. We came home to a full house. Uncle Yun's family had come, and second Uncle Kang Kwang and Munju with her mother, the entire list of people still willing to be seen with us. My mother laid out a real table, fish and meat and everything we had. Nobody mentioned the river or a single name from outside that room. The men drank and talked about the next few years while the women talked about the household, all of us comfortably outside Owa village. Uncle Yun said that once his health came back we should sell the fields, move to the city and never return. My father said we would talk about it later. That night I lay in bed doing arithmetic instead of sleeping. The blood spirit rice had to be planted at scale, since that low-grade spiritual rice was the only door out I could see. Growing it needed fertilizer, and the fertilizer was blood food, which meant hunting the mountains or hauling it out of the water. 100 fragrance rice would solve the luring problem, but a boy my size was not bringing down a wild beast alone. That left telling the adults everything, and I turned it over a long while without deciding whether they would believe a word. The question solved itself, because learning broke through. It settled at minor achievement with the bar swept back to nothing, and the branch it handed me was teacher's authority, which makes people more inclined to believe whatever I tell them. The 4 little ones were playing on the small slope beside our fields, and a few days of drilling them had pushed teaching up a rung as well. I was on my way to find my father when he turned up at the fields ahead of me. It was already the 8th month, so only insect catching and watering were left, and our squad of children could handle that unsupervised. He had left it to them and gone to work Munju's plot instead, since our household is a widow and orphans and everyone with a free hour goes and helps. There are not many of us, so we hold together. He walked his own field first and nodded at the rice, and then the small patch of red on the slope caught his eye. He climbed straight up and asked why on earth I had planted bad rice. I told him I wanted to study it. He explained that the bad rice had turned up last year and a few curious families had boiled it into porridge. It stank of blood and tasted so foul they finished the pot out of pure stubbornness. I said it resembled a plant I had read about in old texts, and that I wanted to watch it. I did not smile where he could see it. The blood spirit rice existed in this valley because of me, and the stalks in other fields last year were stalks I had planted. Orange-red rice in a green paddy is not subtle, so I never worried about it going unnoticed. As for anyone learning what it did, a single stalk is not even a mouthful, and I watched those households until they pronounced it garbage. Once bad rice was settled village opinion, I stopped paying attention. So the story now went that the Kang family's child prodigy had gathered up the rice nobody wanted and worked out its real use. That turned me from the culprit behind a strange new crop into a lucky boy brave enough to taste the first crab. A crop appearing only in Kang fields raises questions, and in a cultivation world where special physiques are a known category, those questions end with somebody taking me away for study. This way it appeared in nature and I got lucky. Every third story out here is about a hunter who ate a strange red fruit and came home strong. Everything was running exactly to plan. I told him I wanted to feed the patch flesh and blood, since some strange plants in the old texts nourish the blood and vital energy when eaten. He did not believe a word of it, because things like that are immortal treasures, and immortal treasures do not grow in the mortal realm. Real spiritual crops only come from immortal realms with spiritual veins under them, and everyone here knows it. I asked what if it was compensation from the heavens, given how hard the last 2 years had ground us. That landed. He thought about the tax hike last year and the rain this year, agreed in principle, then asked how I meant to feed a crop meat when we barely had meat for ourselves. Teacher's authority was doing its work beautifully. So long as the holes in my logic were not too wide, people simply went along with me now. I asked whether he remembered the fishing last winter and told him I had found a special fragrant rice. He remembered it very well, because that day's harvest had been absurd. I explained that the fragrant rice pulls in animals and wild beasts, and that a pinch had brought fish throwing themselves onto the ice. I called it 100 fragrance rice. He nodded and said he had heard of it, that it sold in the city for a great deal and was famously hard to grow. Honestly surprised, I asked whether other places had it too, and he confirmed that they did. Perhaps these were degenerate descendants of real spiritual rice, and my mutation had only woken potential already in the seed. Either way, it was good news, since a crop that exists elsewhere makes me far less interesting. I asked when we were going hunting. He said right now that he would fetch equipment and call second uncle, and that the children should hand over the rice and stay behind. I told him flatly that I was going, and pointed out we could start with small birds and rabbits, none of which were going to kill anybody. He chewed on that and gave in. The other 3 heard the word birds and immediately wanted in, because that is what children do. We set up at the little stream where the fields run into the big mountain. The trap went down, and when I opened the pouch of spiritual rice, the smell rolled across the clearing. Second Uncle Kang Wong said it smelled incredible and asked whether that meant we were rich. My father hushed him and told the little ones this was a secret, because jealousy travels faster than good news out here. They nodded hard, all three. They had stopped playing with the village children months ago, and those children crossed the road when they saw them. I got myself well hidden. Birds came first, and everyone was pleased right up until a wave of rabbits burst out of the brush. The trap was instantly irrelevant. Animals piled onto the bait and fought each other over it. Rabbits shoving birds, and the bamboo basket went spinning into the grass. My father pulled his axe, second uncle refused to be outdone, and the three little ones charged in shrieking with no weapons and no plan. I stood off to the side and took notes. Clearly I needed to use less rice. The two adults were spending exactly one swing per animal, and the animals would not leave. Only when half of them were dead, and the smell of blood finally beat the fragrance, did the rest scatter. I told my father to take a few rabbits home and dump the rest onto the red patch, which I had decided to call blood spirit rice. He dressed the rabbits for the pot and scattered the remaining carcasses under the red stalks. We watched a while and nothing happened. Second uncle asked whether the idea was a dud, and I said it might just be slow. Villagers saw us carrying rabbits home and did not react, since everyone gets a lucky day. The next morning, the whole group hiked out to look, and the bodies were gone. Not scattered, not picked over by scavengers. Gone. Everyone else stood there marveling while I crouched down and read the crop. Growth progress sat at 67%, about 5% higher than the day before, while our ordinary rice hovered near 80. The blood spirit rice was still climbing slowly, which told me one feeding was nowhere near enough. Blood food would be a standing expense. I suggested we build a bait cage that night. Drop 100 fragrance rice inside, and sink it so we could pull a batch out daily. Uncle Yun said there was a deep pond up the mountain, thick with fish, and well out of sight. Somewhere in the last few months I had quietly become the one who decided things, and both men now waited to hear what I thought before they moved. Meanwhile, the village had stopped bothering to be subtle. Some had probably planned to patch things up once Lee Bugwee's charity ran out. But habit is a terrifying machine, and a man left long enough in one atmosphere forgets what he intended. When a cane crossed their path, they looked straight through us. Ignoring us had become the settled civic virtue of Oha village, and since we had better things than they did, we stopped thinking about them. That innermost acre had turned into something I was proud of. Almost entirely high-yield rice and 100 fragrance rice, with a little grain-fasting rice threaded through for decoration. The good varieties kept creeping outward, and anything worthwhile that mutated on Uncle Yun's plot got transplanted inward. I read other families' fields too, and their health was in genuine trouble, most sitting between half and 60%, which means a 40% cut at harvest. I did wonder whether Lee Bugwee's granary was as deep as his promises. Not my problem. I told my father we should build a hidden storeroom on the mountain and keep part of the harvest there in case anyone got envious enough to act. Then I pushed further and said we could put up a whole courtyard and live there, well away from them. We were still weak, so the rule was patience and quiet. He thumped his chest and promised that he and Uncle Yun would raise one in secret over the winter. Autumn came around again, and it came in bleak. The fields looked chewed compared to last year, bare patches in every plot and long faces on every path. Owa village still had Lee Bugwee's promise, so most were confident about the winter. We were marginalized by then, and our village house looked one storm from collapse, which was deliberate. Showing weakness to an enemy cost nothing. The Kang family lived like recluses down there, while everything that mattered had moved up the mountain. The courtyard was not finished, but it could hold people. Between my drawings and Uncle Yun's hands, it came out looking remarkably like the old courtyard houses of my previous life. I also brought out a run of machines that were really memories. A foot pedal thresher, a river-driven water wheel that hauled the grain, and a winnowing fan for the chaff. My old country home in that life had been full of those antiques, and I had watched them turn as a child. Principles plus learning got me the rest of the way, and my versions probably differ in a dozen small ways while doing the same work. The village still beat their harvest out with flails, and 4 of us finished ours without anyone's shoulders giving out. We kept our mouths shut about all of it, because the village was still looking forward to laughing at us. People compare after 2 neighbors walk different roads, and there's a private pleasure in watching the other road wash out. If the Kang family had visibly prospered, that pleasure would have curdled into resentment, and I would not care to guess what a resentful village does when it gets hungry. So the outside walls stayed shabby. The harvest itself turned into a festival. Everyone turned out, the women and all 4 children included, and over several days we cut, threshed, hulled, and came out with white rice. Uncle Yun ran the thresher without stopping and kept saying how much easier this would have been 20 years ago. My father, bagging grain behind him, said it was thanks to little Ran. Uncle Yun laughed and admitted that watching the village sweat through the old methods had nearly broken his composure in public. My father said that was precisely why nobody could ever find out, and the 2 old men laughed like boys. The women washed rice down at the stream with somi and moon juice splashing underfoot, and the slope was noisy in the best way. I stood back and felt something close to contentment. Clean mountains, clear water, a reliable spring, and enough flat ground to build on. The only drawback is how far it sits from the village and the road, which is why nobody ever claimed it, and exactly why I could. Then came the tedious part. I sorted the mutated rice by hand, easy for blood spirit rice because the color gives it away, and miserable for everything else, since only appraisal can tell identical grains apart. I picked out every grain of 100 fragrance rice and left the rest mixed, since it was all going into the same pot. Grain-fasting rice was scarce enough that all of it went aside for seed, while the high-yield rice joined the general store. After several days I stood up, stretched until my spine cracked, and pulled up my panel. My name at the top, then my titles, with child prodigy currently equipped in night owl and father of winter fishing sitting behind it. Lifespan 6 of 78. Comprehension ability 65, 20 of which was the title's doing. Appraisal at max level, where it started and where it will stay. Learning at minor achievement 87%, teaching at minor achievement 13%, carrying teacher's authority, farming at major achievement 34%, carrying mutation and a 10% harvest bonus. Forging at minor achievement 23% with its 5% success rate. And fishing at entry level 95%, one good afternoon from tipping over. Learning was going to be a problem. There is nothing left to read in Owa Village since I have finished every book in it, and nobody has bought new ones from the city lately. Teaching is a long road. Farming had jumped a great deal this season, most likely off the harvest bonus, and with luck it breaks through next year. Forging climbs steadily, though I have never felt that success rate do anything. Fishing was the one about to pop. Next year's plan was simple, since the innermost acre goes entirely to blood spirit rice. This year's experimental patch produced just under 50 pounds, which sounds like nothing and is a great deal, most of it credited to the harvest bonus. Owa Village normally pulls 300 pounds an acre, and last year most households cracked 350. Our innermost acre came in near 500, so this year's total beat last year's comfortably, which put my father in a mood I had not seen in 2 years. 100 fragrance rice came to roughly 500 pounds across every plot. An acre's worth of seed goes aside for each of the two. The remainder was mine to poison myself with, since I wanted the best way to eat the stuff settled before feeding it to the courtyard. So I spent the following days cooking for myself, and somewhere in the middle of it the system quietly awakened culinary skill. My mother had always cooked and I had always eaten, since every spare hour went to skills that seemed to matter more. It had never crossed my mind that a rice pot could open a new line. Better to have it than not. One day of experimenting established the central fact of blood spirit rice, which is that it is revolting. The smell of blood off a hot pot of it is a physical assault, and I say that as somebody who thought he was prepared. No wonder the village named it bad rice on the first try. I had been smug about never having tasted it, and I was wrong. So I fell back on chemistry. I mixed it with 100 fragrance rice, boiled the two together, and dumped in an unreasonable quantity of scallion, ginger, and garlic to bully the blood smell down. What came out was a pale purple porridge with a raft of green on top. I tasted it and decided strange was a significant improvement over nauseating. One bowl filled me completely. Then my whole body started steaming. There was so much energy in me that sitting still became physically uncomfortable. So I got up and followed the feeling. I ran, then did calisthenics, frog jumps, push-ups, every exercise my previous life had ever inflicted on me, and every one I had skipped. The strange part was how pleasant it felt. A warm current moved through me the whole time, and instead of fatigue there was only the sensation of a hot spring in deep winter. If exercise had felt like this back when I owned a gym membership, I would have had an 8-pack and a very different life. 2 hours in, the warmth ebbed and my stomach began complaining. I reheated the porridge, drank more, went back to it, and the whole day disappeared into that loop. Several days of accounting gave me the optimal ratio. 1 ounce of blood spirit rice and 1 of 100 fragrance rice a day, plus scallion and ginger, boiled into porridge and split across morning, noon, and night. 2 hours of hard exercise after each bowl, 6 hours daily, past which returns fell off sharply. After setting aside seed I had 30 pounds left, and 1 pound feeds me 10 days. 300 days reaches next harvest, even with a growing appetite. Which is how everyone in the courtyard came to witness the same daily performance. The boy drinks a bowl of purple porridge, then goes outside and does incomprehensible things with his body, 3 times a day. The consensus among the adults was that I had poisoned myself. Eventually my father intercepted me on the way to the pot and asked whether that stuff was even edible. I told him it was extremely useful and asked whether he really did not believe me. He asked how he possibly could, so I offered him a contest, and when he asked what kind, I said arm wrestling. That is how the first arm wrestling championship of the courtyard came to be held, with the entire household crowding around. We took our positions across a wooden table, and second Uncle Kang Guang appointed himself referee. My father looked across at a 6-year-old he could still pick up with one hand, and visibly wondered whether he ought to let me win a little for the sake of my pride. While he was still wondering, second uncle called the start. He had braced for me to lunge. I did not move at all, which made it impossible for him to pretend gracefully. I asked why he was so weak and told him to actually use some strength. He said fine, if that was how it would be, and leaned in. My hand did not shift. He added more and it still did not shift, and by then second uncle was heckling him to stop acting and show his real strength. He was not acting. Sweat had come out on his forehead and both our hands were trembling. In fairness, I had only been eating and training a few days, and without the system pushing behind it, none of this would have been possible. Body refining, 13%. That was the new line that had appeared, and it did not carry any of the usual skill rungs at all. No entry level, nothing. I filed it under the immortal path rather than the skill ladder, and left it alone. Second uncle said out loud that there was no way the Rand boy could be that strong, because my father was obviously not faking. Veins stood up on the back of his hand and his teeth were clenched. So I stopped being polite and pushed, and his arm went down slowly and steadily. The 3 little ones screamed, and the women covered their mouths, while second uncle and Uncle Jan stared at the pale purple pot with a new kind of interest. Then it was over, and I had won. Second uncle told my father to get out of the chair so he could test the Rand boy himself. My father rubbed his wrist and warned him to be careful, because the boy's strength had genuinely gone up. Second uncle lasted about as long as my father had. I asked him how it was, with as much modesty as I could manage. He said, with feeling, that I was truly formidable. So the whole courtyard had now seen what blood spirit rice does. A boy not yet 7 had outpulled 2 men who had farmed for decades, and there is no arguing with a wooden table. Most of it was the system plus a growing body, and every session of exercise nudged body refining higher. What it would do for the others, I could not say, and this year's crop barely covered me. Everyone else would wait for next autumn. Still, I had no intention of keeping it to myself, because a courtyard full of strong people is worth more than one strong boy. So I asked Uncle Jan whether his illness came down to a decline in his blood and vital energy. He blinked and said it did, which was exactly the physician's diagnosis in the city, that he had damaged his foundation years ago and the deficiency had been hollowing him out since. I proposed that since blood spirit rice strengthens the body, the first share should go to him. The room lit up, and Auntie's face most of all, since that family had carried the worry for years. My father agreed at once, and everyone accepted the logic easily, because the worst case with food is an unpleasant night. Uncle Yen waved both hands and insisted it should go to my father and second uncle first, since they did the heavy work. They deferred to each other until I cut it off and said that after next year's crop everyone would be eating it, so this was only a question of order. I added that once he recovered, he could reopen the blacksmith shop, which made him income rather than charity. That settled it. First share to him and second to me, with the rest taking the occasional bowl as a tonic. The tax officials came around as the new year approached. We sent my father and second uncle, dressed in the most pitiful clothing we owned, to push the grain over and leave without a word. The villagers watched them go with open pity and private satisfaction. They muttered that Kang Jian still refused to bow his head, and that the family was starving for pride while dreaming of the days when the Kangs were glorious. A newcomer asked whether the Kangs had ever been glorious, since all he had seen them do was farm. He was told my father's grandfather had once been the closest thing to heaven this region had. Neither of them heard a word of it. Back at the courtyard, Uncle Yeon and I were counting through a set of exercises imported from a life nobody here would believe in. We reached 200 and blew out a long breath as the front gate opened. I asked my father how it had gone. He said he and second uncle were consummate professionals who had paid and walked straight back, and second uncle added that the clothes really sold it. I told him it would not be many more years before we stopped having to fear anyone. Nobody found that strange coming from a child, because by then they had all quietly started treating me as an adult. Then Uncle Jan and I picked up wooden sticks and went at each other in the open yard. Neither of us held back, and we were both purple within a quarter hour, which had my mother and auntie watching through their fingers. They shouted at us to stop, waited until we stopped anyway, then checked the damage while complaining about the state of us. Technique we did not have, and 2 amateurs flailing is an accurate description. But my definition of combat is simple, which is that you avoid being hit and then you hit. So we spent every bout hunting awkward angles while trying not to walk into one. Sometimes the other 3 little ones joined in as artillery, lobbing beanbags at us while we dodged inside a marked square. At first 9 out of every 10 found us, and by winter we were slipping 5 or 6, the dodging gone below conscious thought. By then, Uncle Yeon and I could take my father and second uncle together without a hit. Since the rice made bodies stronger, it would have been stupid not to build fighting on top of it. Strength plus enough skill to use it means a man can go anywhere. There were bandits on every road between here and the city, and I had no intention of leaving my life in somebody else's hands. Life ran quiet after that, and I kept growing. Fishing finally tipped over into minor achievement, and the branch I had been so curious about turned out to be never go empty-handed. I already own 100 fragrance rice. I have never once come home empty-handed in my life. Still, I supposed it would save me some bait. Between training and sparring, I made time to fish the lake, mostly to settle my head. There were plenty of others on the winter ice, and not one of them spoke to me anymore, which suited me perfectly. Inside our walls, the Kang family lived comfortably, and from outside we looked like we were dying. The village had built a whole narrative about it. 4 families crammed into one yard near the mountains, too poor to eat, saved only by the little prodigies fishing. Somebody wondered whether we feared the wild beasts, and was told beasts hibernate. That conversation was happening in a line at the village square, where thin-faced people waited for the shout that food was served. When it came from the Lee mansion, they formed up neatly, because anyone who shoved got pulled out by the inspection team and sent to the back. One man praised Master Lee for handing out free porridge in the dead of winter, and another wondered whether the family had enough rice to keep it up. A third said there was plenty, since the copied water pumps were selling like mad in the city. Somebody said they really ought to be thanking the Kang prodigy, and was hushed at once and told the pump was a Lee invention. Most of them felt sorry for me and blamed my father's pride for dragging me down. While they queued, we sat around a round table inside the courtyard with a pot steaming in the middle. Fish slices went in, came out, got dipped in sauce, and disappeared. I said around a mouthful that hot pot in deep winter is simply how the season is meant to be spent. The table was loud, and the 3 little ones ate like they were being timed, and my mother told them not to worry, since Brother Ran had caught enough for a week. Second uncle took a sip of wine and said he had no idea how the Ran boy's head worked, but that this way of eating was a very fine invention. In a cold winter, a family crowded around one pot is about as warm as this world gets. Over at the Lee estate that same season, there were lanterns and streamers on every eve, and guests coming and going all day. The Lee family's young master, Lee Mun, had been taken as a disciple by an immortal master and had come home for the new year. The lucky few who witnessed the arrival swore the immortal master conjured a fireball with a lift of his hand. In the main hall, Lee Bugui sat high in a grand tutor's chair and asked the old man in Taoist robes whether his son's comprehension ability had improved this year. Gong Jijo, white-haired as a crane and calm as still water, answered with the air of a man dispensing profound wisdom. He said young Master Lee's aptitude was extraordinary and that all he lacked was a little opportunity. With sufficient wealth, he could refine a Tao comprehension pill to carry the boy over that step, after which the boy would be a dragon rising into open sky. Lee Bugui laughed, declared he had wealth in abundance and sought only his son's immortal ascension, and sent people running for the herbs. Gong Jijo smiled and traded pleasantries, delighted. Mortal rich men are so easy to work, he thought, and that little fatty had no aptitude whatsoever, not so much as a spiritual root. The father was the rare talent, with water pumps selling into the imperial city in Owa village under his thumb like a local emperor. Word was that Beast Tide was nearly finished, so the thing to do was make a fast fortune before the 3 sects recovered. Then leave. Lee Bugui felt personally blessed by the gods that year, his old rival ruined and his own son placed in an immortal sect. He was already thinking ahead to the Kang family's collapse, when he would take the wife and the son both, since that child prodigy was clever and worth raising. Heo Seol had dared to refuse him once, and only because she liked Kang Jeon's face. She could never have imagined the mighty Kang family falling, while Lee Bugui rose. 2 men sat in that hall smiling at each other with entirely separate plans behind their teeth. Winter turned over into spring, and the villagers went out to prepare their fields, breeding seed and turning soil. Lee Bugui's porridge had carried every household through the cold, and that daily line had bound them together like veterans of a shared war. Owa village had never been closer, and the Kang family had stopped being a topic. Anyone who had planned to mend fences after the new year dropped it, not because we were incapable, but because Lee Bugui was the better offer. We were busy too. The outer wall stayed deliberately shabby while the inside was transformed. It gained a bathhouse, a drainage system, and a long list of small conveniences I proposed, until my father stopped questioning them. Nearly everyone was on body-nourishing porridge by then, which is what I named the blood spirit rice porridge once I tired of describing it, and every one of them was visibly stronger. We bred and sowed according to plan, with the last acre still fenced off behind wooden boards in case something went wrong. Then the year went by without a single disaster, which after the last 2 felt almost suspicious. Snow was coming down hard outside when I pulled up the panel again. My name, then the titles, Child Prodigy still equipped with Night Owl and Father of Winter Fishing behind it. Lifespan, 7 of 83. Comprehension ability, 110. 20 of that still the title. Appraisal at max level. Then cultivation. Reading body refining first realm at 45%. Learning had crossed into major achievement at 2%. Carrying everlasting memory and a 50% experience gain. Teaching sat at minor achievement. 45%, still on teacher's authority. Farming had reached perfection at 1%, carrying mutation, the 10% harvest bonus, and something new called breeding. Forging had climbed to minor achievement at 70%, and fishing to minor achievement at 8%. Culinary skill came in at minor achievement, 23%, with a branch making food 30 points more delicious. The year had gone well, and the enormous surprise was learning, stuck forever and then blooming all at once. It brought 3 changes. My comprehension ability doubled from 45 to 90, and with the child prodigy title on top that came to 110. My mind moves faster now, and most things I meet I understand on contact. Everlasting memory lets me replay anything I've lived through like a film, and the experience gain accelerates everything else, which is almost certainly why farming reached perfection this year instead of next. I had assumed perfection was the top of the ladder, right up until I noticed the percentage sitting beside it. A rung with a bar under it is not a ceiling, it is a landing. There is another stage above this one, and I intend to see it. Perfection also handed me breeding, the first genuinely active ability I have been given, letting me push a seed to develop in a direction I choose. The obvious first target is blood spirit rice. On the immortal side, the rice had done everything I hoped. I had entered the body refining first realm, whatever that means in the wider world, and my lifespan ceiling had risen by 5 solid years. My strength and speed had left ordinary mortals behind, and I can punch a tree and leave a fish-shaped dent with nothing happening to my hand. I had stopped sparring with the household, partly from fear of breaking someone, and partly because there was no point. My father and both uncles together go down in short order. So far, I am the only one to reach the first realm of body refining. Everyone else stalls at a certain point and simply stops. Even Uncle Jan, who has been eating the largest share. It might be quantity, or it might be that they lack correct guidance, a real cultivation technique to shape what the food gives them. Meanwhile, the system lets me break through without hesitating. The blood spirit rice harvest came in at 350 pounds off a single acre, enough to feed the whole courtyard daily for a year. My appetite had doubled since the breakthrough, so next year we expand the planting. A year of mutual beating had also produced results. My father, second uncle, Uncle Yeon, and I were all serious fighters by then, and I would put any one of us against 10 imperial soldiers. Around villagers we had stopped bothering to be careful at all. Uncle Yun was broad through the shoulders now and carried more vigor than in his best years. He told me over the winter that he meant to reopen the blacksmith shop after the new year, and asked whether I wanted to come along. His family would stay behind, because the courtyard is safe, and it has the rice. I said yes, since I wanted to buy books and study medicine at the medical hall. Medicine had been on my list for years without the strength to back it, and the first realm of body refining changed that arithmetic. At my speed, a mortal would struggle to catch me, and catching me is not the same as beating me, bandits included. The household settled on 3 travelers, my father, myself, and Uncle Yeon. 3 fighters were unlikely to attract bandits. The worst case was a brawl, and if that went badly, we could outrun anything on the road. First, though, there was the new year to eat through. I fished as usual, and across that year, I had also used 100 fragrance rice to lure and hunt monster beast meat, so the hot pot was a serious affair. I tried planting some of our vegetables, though nothing has ever mutated, most likely because my sample size is too small. Another year passed in warmth and quiet, and if the place lacked liveliness, it made that up in peace. One day I sat down to prepare next year's seed, which now meant breeding. I started with a high-yield rice as a test. The system asked whether I wanted to breed it. I answered yes, and the seeds in my palm glowed faintly and were finished. The high-yield rice now read a 30% yield increase, up from 10. My skill bonus multiplies against the seed's own rather than adding to it, so stacked with the farming branch that is roughly 43% more harvest than ordinary rice. I wanted to keep going, but the system said each seed could only be bred once. The wording was vague enough that I could not tell whether the variety was finished forever or whether next year's crop could be bred again. I moved on. 100 fragrance rice and grain fasting rice both went through cleanly and were elevated into the ranks of low-grade spiritual rice. Their effects sharpened to where they could faintly strengthen the body and extend life. Then came the bad news, because the system now listed a planting requirement for both. They must be grown on a spiritual vein. Fortunately, I had run only a portion of my stock through and the originals still filled the seed jars, or I would have sat down and wept. I have never so much as seen a spiritual vein. A crop I cannot plant is an expensive decoration. So I packed those seeds away. Then the one I had been waiting for. Blood spirit rice is genuinely strange. A spiritual rice that needs no spiritual vein and instead runs on blood food as fertilizer. That is not a comfortable sentence to say out loud. My hope was that breeding might sand the edge off before somebody looked at my fields and said the word demonic. I focused on the grains and triggered the ability, and this time it did not simply resolve. It offered me a choice. The first option was medium grade, feeding on the flesh and blood of all living things, strengthening the physical body, and possessing a certain capacity for autonomous predation. The second was medium grade, feeding on monster beast flesh and blood, raising blood and vital energy, and strengthening the physical body. I took the second without needing to think. Rice that hunts is not agriculture. It is a horror story, and I could not imagine eating a bowl of something that had been feeding on its own initiative. All living things presumably includes the human race, which is the sort of crop that gets a man chased across a continent by the righteous path. Worse, if a variety like that ever reached the demonic path and was turned against ordinary people, the sin would trace straight back to me. As for the monster race, my position is simple. They are not our kind, and their hearts are not our hearts. There are probably decent monster beasts out there who mean humans no harm, and the most I can promise is to avoid killing those if I meet them. I have no grand dream of a world where every species holds hands. I can manage myself, strengthen myself, and make sure the people around me live well, and past that, I have neither the reach nor the inclination. Happily, the bred blood spirit rice could still be planted in the mortal realm. How to keep it supplied with monster beast meat was another question, along with whether ordinary animals count, and both answers had to come out of the soil. I planted only a small patch, so my experimental plot went back into service. If it works, that medium-grade crop might be what pushes my father and the others past their bottleneck. Worth noting, ordinary rice and vegetables cannot be bred at all, and my guess is that plain seed lacks potential and must go through mutation before breeding has anything to grip. Then I put in a long stretch of breeding work, running the rest of the seed stock through one variety at a time. Before we left, I sat my father and second uncle down and went through the coming season's instructions in detail. After the new year, the three of us set out for Cheonsu City, pushing a handcart of grain, which we expected to sell for near 100 ounces of silver. Half would put Uncle Yeon's shop back on its feet, and the rest was earmarked for books and daily necessities. What none of us expected was 3 separate waves of bandits on one road. The first 2 were 3 to 5 men each and went down without trouble. The third wave was about 100, and it closed around us properly. The 3 of us put our backs together and watched the ring, and just as we were picking a direction to smash through, a familiar face rode into the middle of it. My father said his name, and I said uncle, both of us at the same moment. One of the 2 men on horseback was my mother's older brother, Heo Song, which also makes him Heo Somi's father. He called it quite a coincidence, and said he had never expected to run into Brother Jian, and little ran out here. He parted the crowd, walked over completely relaxed, and told his men to put their weapons down, because these were his own people. Then he learned we were headed to the city and offered to escort us personally, calling for the brothers to make way. A young man with a broad tiger-like head stepped forward with 20 or 30 behind him. We all let out a breath. The man who had once knelt in our doorway begging my family to take in his daughter and then walked away with nothing was now a bandit chief. A lamentable thing to see. Looking at the situation, I thought, it seems there will be no need to fight, which is exactly what a person thinks immediately before the situation changes. The men on the outer ring did not disperse. They pulled back out the weapons they had just put away and leveled them at Heo Sang's back. Then a voice came down from the man still mounted on the high slope, calling him second brother. For the sake of the family connection, the voice said these 3 could pay half the road toll instead of all of it. A second boss has to think about the brothers too, and cannot arrange comfortable lives for his own relatives while everyone else goes hungry. Heo Sang's face closed like a door. He drew his sword and said this was not what they had agreed, and the 20-odd men behind him drew with him and formed a ring around the 3 of us. That split the crowd cleanly into 2 camps, better than 80 men under the chief on the slope and just over 20 under Heo Sang. The chief asked what the difference was, since everyone does it this way. Heo Sang asked whether he had forgotten the oath they swore when Cheongpung village was founded. Jung Gyeon shouted back that caring for the brothers was exactly what he was doing, since everyone has to eat. Loyalty, he said, is the most useless thing a man can carry, and they were bandits already. Heo Sang answered that they were righteous bandits, that the agreement was 30% of the toll for a safe escort, and that travelers had started seeking them out for it. He looked around at the road and his face filled with grief. The elder brother, he remembered, had tasted power and developed an appetite. 30% had become half, then everything, with only the traveler's life left as a courtesy. So the traffic dried up, the stronghold's spending outran its income, and they started eyeing the farming villages. His brother remembered only that he was master of Changpung village, with 100 men behind him. Perhaps, Heo Sang thought, that brother had already died, killed by his own greed. He made up his mind and his eyes settled. He scanned the men around him and said that whoever agreed with his ideals should come and stand behind him. There was a long moment of everyone looking at everyone, and then a handful turned and walked over. They had joined this stronghold with a shred of conscience still in them, and had only become outlaws out of desperation. Jung Jian laughed and asked what following that man would earn them. 30% of a toll and lean living all year. He asked what the point of being a bandit even was. and promised the strongest wine and the most beautiful women to anyone who came with him. He told them to think about Black Wind Village, all of them fat and well-fed, and asked whether that lot had ever wasted a breath on loyalty. It worked. The men who had been wavering drew their blades and turned green eyes on Haosang. Jung Gian knew his second brother's character and understood what those eyes meant. His second brother was still too naive, he thought. Power brings food and money and beautiful women, all of it within reach. This whole Muyang dynasty is nothing but a larger stronghold doing precisely what we do, so why should the throne not be mine? He had once believed the two of them would take the world together, and their roads had simply run different directions. Once his brother was dealt with, he could expand as he pleased. He raised his hand and gave the order to kill. 80 men charged with a roar. Haosang drew and led his 20-odd into them, and even in the middle of it he turned to shout at us to run. Uncle Yun Myung-sing asked what we were doing. My father and I answered in the same breath that we were going in. We pulled the wooden staves off the cart and charged. All three of us were fast and strong, and every angle we took was awkward for the man on the other end of it. That worked out to roughly 1 blow per bandit, after which the bandit stayed down. Haosang, watching his brother-in-law and his 8-year-old nephew run into 100 men, felt something he could not name. He had just sworn to himself that he would keep us alive, even if it cost him his life. Then he watched, and the swearing became unnecessary. 3 figures went through that crowd like wolves through a pen. Inside a minute, a dozen men were flat on the ground and making noise about it, and the momentum behind them faltered. Jung Jian, watching from his horse, shouted that there were only 3 of them, that one was a child, and that they were fighting with sticks. Then he stopped underestimating us, took up his long spear, and rode in himself. And his men found their courage and followed. I swept the ring around me clear with 1 horizontal cut. Jung Gian came at me first, reasonably assuming the child was the soft spot in the line. I vaulted the swords converging on me, and when the spear came in, it was fast by any ordinary standard and slow to my eyes. I tilted my head off the line, let the point pass, and caught the shaft with my free hand. Then I pulled. A grown man came off a horse and hit the road, and I gave him the beating his whole career had been asking for. His screaming brought the battle to a halt, and his own men watched their boss, who had not lasted a single exchange, being worked over by a child. Every one of them threw down his sword and squatted with his hands on his head. My father and Uncle Yun were still going, and even they had not known they were this strong. Either of them could stand in a crowd, blocking and slipping, and simply not get touched. The bandits were routed. Little Tiger stood over the battlefield and asked Boss Heo why he had never mentioned that his relatives were like this. He had fought exactly 1 man before it ended, and the brothers behind him never found opponents at all. They stood around baffled until the men in front explained. The consensus was that escorting these 3 was absurd, since the boy had taken Boss Jung off his horse in about 3 moves. 100 of them had nearly tried to rob 3 great heroes. Haosang stood in the wind with his mouth slightly open. Through all of it, he had braced for a bloodbath and taken no casualties, because 2 men and a boy had put the fear of death into 80. When his sister chose Kang Jian, he had privately thought she could have done better, and now he had to admit she had excellent taste. I had already stopped, and I turned and asked my uncle what he wanted done with all this, which was the point at which he came back to himself. Haosang got the road cleaned up and then went to look at Jung Jian, trussed in a 5-flower knot and swollen until his own clothes were the only reliable identification. Haosang pulled the gag out, and Jung Jian immediately began begging. He called him second brother, said big brother had been wrong, and asked why he had never mentioned in-laws like that. With 3 generals of this quality, he said they could carve out territory, topple the Muyang dynasty, and sit on thrones. He worked the sentiment angle as hard as a man can work it while tied up. Haosang told him honestly that he had not known either, and that it was fortunate, because otherwise he would never have seen his brother's true face. Then his own face went cold. From the moment a sword was drawn on him, he said, the man in front of him had stopped being his big brother. Whether he lived was no longer a decision that belonged to Haosang. Jung Gian went white and begged him to plead on his behalf, invoking all their years together. A blade flashed, a few strands of hair drifted down, and the sentence stopped where it was. Then he turned and asked how we wanted Jung Gian handled, since the man was technically our captive. I said we did not mind, and asked what he intended. He thought a moment and said that killing him was simply correct, since he had thrown away their brotherhood and drawn on him. An enemy, he added, is a problem best pulled up by the root. I nodded to myself. This uncle is clear-headed and decent, and a man like that is worth investing in. So it was settled. Jung Gian and his closest men were killed and buried on the spot, and everyone else was absorbed by Haosang. Chongpeng village had held about 100 and now held roughly 80. We could not refuse the invitation, so we went up to see the place. It sat in a hidden valley with water and flat ground, about 20 acres under cultivation, and a great deal of wasteland around it. I liked it enormously since it could comfortably carry a force of up to 1,000. Owa village runs about 50 households and counts as large locally, and this valley could hold 2 or 3 of it. I decided on the spot that this place was going to be mine. We held the discussion in Jung Gyeon's old house, a grand building now repurposed into a council hall. His relatives and friends were put under guard and given the terms plainly. They would never leave this valley again, and if they behaved, they could live out their days here. If not, there was nothing further to discuss. I took out some blood spirit rice, since there were no outsiders present, and nothing left to hide. I had already confirmed that I am the only one who breaks through into the first realm of body refining while everyone else stalls. Even if my uncle harbored designs of his own, one hand would be enough to put him down. He stared at the blood-colored grain, sniffed it, and pulled a face. I told him that was right, that the rice strengthens the body if you eat it long enough. He asked eagerly whether he and his brothers could become as strong as we were. I said yes, provided the yield keeps up, and added that I would not let them eat it openly. Leaders need an advantage that is visibly theirs, and the rice works far better as a reward for real contributions than as a daily ration. I laid it out point by point. My father and Uncle Yan were used to that, and it visibly rearranged Heo Sang's understanding of his nephew, since it was the first time he had seen me operate. I walked them through the 100 fragrance rice, the high-yield rice, and the grain-fasting rice. Even my father was startled, since there were varieties in that list he had never laid eyes on, and he grumbled about it. I explained that Oha village was never safe enough to display any of it, while this valley belongs to my uncle and can be planted at scale without anybody watching. The next morning the 3 of us went on, while Heo Sang stayed to reorganize Cheongpung village and break more ground, waiting for the seed we would send. My own seed was back at the courtyard, and the cart carried only ordinary rice for sale, and the blood spirit rice set aside for Uncle Yeon. The rest of the road was uneventful. The blacksmith shop had sat closed for 2 years and wore every day of it in dust, though nothing had been stolen, since it stood inside the walls. The 3 of us cleaned and repaired until it looked like a going concern. The grain sold, the silver went out as planned, and I bought a stack of medical books to work straight through. Once I had a foundation, I would find the physician here and get taught properly, and asked for whether he would teach a child. My position is that money moves the world. Everything was pleasant right up until we walked past a Lee family shop and saw my water pump sitting in front of it, openly for sale. My father went incandescent and asked why we did not go to the magistrate and take it back, since we had strength enough now. I told him it was useless, because we had no concrete evidence that we invented it. He said indignantly that half the village had watched me build the thing. I pointed out that the village's heart belongs to the Lee family now, and nothing changes until either our standing passes theirs or they lose the village's goodwill. I stayed calm, because the Lee family's behavior is disgusting and also irrelevant to me. My eyes have always been aimed at the Tao of immortals, and things of the mortal realm are minor by definition. Once I am a cultivator, there will be people happy to settle trivia like this for me. Even without a spiritual root, the road of body refining is open under my feet, and while I cannot see a body cultivator's ceiling, it is clearly well above anything mortal. So Uncle Yun stayed at the shop, and my father and I pushed the cart home loaded with books, cloth, and quilts. Home and back into the routine. Worth recording, the medium-grade blood spirit rice does grow, but painfully slowly. Ordinary animal meat helps and does not help much, which suggests it wants monster beast flesh. On animal meat alone, I estimated 2 years to a usable crop, so I shelved medium grade at scale and kept my weight on low grade. Once the 7th month opened, it was field management season, with medical books stacked on top, and my days were packed. Beyond the pest and weed work that needed my hands, I handed everything to my father and second uncle. My hours went to medicine, with a meal cooked now and then to feed culinary skill. Learning and teaching climbed steadily, since by then I was functionally a schoolmaster, drilling the 4 little ones in farming, fishing, and basic medicine. When my head got full, I fished a lake, which raised that skill while pretending to be a rest. Body refining never got skipped, because it is the entire capital I plan to adventure on. Forging I set aside. One thing did puzzle me, which is that no medical skill ever appeared. Between everlasting memory and a comprehension ability of 110, medicine had gone down easily. I had the books memorized outright, symptoms filed away in order, and I could match a prescription to a presentation without hesitating. Something was still missing, and the only candidate I could think of was practical experience. So the answer was to go work in a medical hall. I told my parents, and they agreed without argument, since the head of the Kang household had quietly changed some time ago. The family had security now, and the 4 little ones had grown into competent hands under my drilling, holding the fields at 90% health even if they cannot quite reach the full 100. I left with a clear conscience, and my first stop was Chongpung village. The whole courtyard was shifting its center of gravity by then. Owa village is far from the city. The roads are bad, and there are too many eyes in it, so we would move after this year's harvest. As for the Lee family, I could only smile, because they had been busily digging their own grave. For reasons nobody could explain, they had started grabbing wealth with both hands, and had reached toward the villagers too. Their reasoning was that they had carried everyone through last winter and deserved repaying. Nobody said much, because the debt was real. The plan among the villagers was to settle it this year and then quietly cut ties. I thought that plan was dangerously optimistic. The Lee family's inspection team had never disbanded, and was in fact growing, and their intentions were written across the arrangement in plain letters. The villagers refused to read it, either because Lee Bugwee's persona had been crafted too well, or because they would not give up a comfortable delusion. None of it touches the Kang family, so as long as they do not come at us, they can do as they like. Once the reputation collapses, I will report them myself. Their network of officials in the city is not loyalty but pricing, and when the Kang family can outbid them, those same officials will help us take the Lee family apart. It seems I need to start making contact with the cultivation world. I was thinking that as I rode into Cheongpung village. The place had turned beautiful, clear water and clean mountains, everything carefully managed, no less than 100 acres under the plow, and still spreading. After the purge, with our mutated seed in the ground, they had begun recruiting again. The old business resumed too, 30% of the toll for safe escort, and while trade had not flooded back, it was moving. With the stronghold's accumulated wealth on top, this year was not in doubt, and the harvest would fund real expansion. A portion of the 100 acres went to blood spirit rice, and the rest to a spread of mutated varieties. The one hard limit is blood food, which caps how much of the crop can exist. At first, they barely got 3 acres worked, and even that took large hunting parties after fierce beasts. Since the fiercer the beasts, the better the crop develops. Wolves, bears, tigers. All of that came out of my 2 years of research, during which I also ran the experiment nobody wants to run, testing whether humans work as blood food. The purge at Cheongpung village had supplied the material. The answer is that blood spirit rice grown on human blood food is deeply wrong. Eating it drives a person violent and frantic, attacking anyone within reach. Whether that is sentience, or complex emotions, or resentment staying in the soil, I cannot say. I gave a flat order that humans are never used as fertilizer, and that more animals get hunted instead, and that decision cost us a few casualties. Then the whole problem solved itself, and the solution was rats. A prolific, filthy, universally hated animal that turned out to be a perfect match for blood spirit rice. Scatter a little 100 fragrance rice around the village, set traps, and within a night you have hundreds. One batch feeds an acre for a day, with leftovers still undigested next morning, and a fresh batch comes every 10 days to a fortnight. Best of all, rats are everywhere, and wealthy households in the city pay to have them removed. So Cheongpung village gained a second income and a permanent supply of blood food at once. 2 more acres went in, bringing us to 5. We could have gone further, and there was no reason to, since 5 acres alone supports 40 people's cultivation for a year. My uncle Haosang and a handful of his most trusted men had started eating it already, drawn from the Kang family's stored grain so they could lock down control first. Everyone else comes in after this year's harvest. The list runs to about 20 names, all men who stood behind Haosang on the day everything changed, and every one of them is trustworthy. Trained up by next year, Cheongpung village will be genuinely stable. I toured the valley and found the development excellent, with facilities going up everywhere. This is not a stronghold anymore so much as a town growing into itself. It will never get truly large since roughly 1,000 people is the ceiling, but everything a city needs is on the plan, and in a few years it will earn the name. I stayed the night, ate with my uncle and his men, and rode for the city at dawn. The ride took under an hour, where a round trip to Owa village eats most of a day, which is precisely why I had been moving everything closer to the city. Growth happens near roads and markets, not where the mountain swallows an afternoon. I came through the gate, went straight to an inn, tied up my horse, and had the stable boy feed it. I had grown fast, standing about 5 feet now and reading to strangers like a young hero of 15 or 16. I was 8. I asked the innkeeper for room 1043, and he took down a key and handed it over without a question. Upstairs, I ignored his key entirely and used one I carry on my own person. Then I sat quietly and waited, and before long somebody came in, not through the door but through a hidden panel in the wall, and set down the information I had asked for. Then he withdrew. 6 months turned Cheongpung village into something its old bandits would not recognize. The men who once came down the mountain with knives now come down with sacks of 100 fragrance rice, sold to the richest houses in Cheonsu City at prices I set myself. We are off the bandit road entirely, closer to the organizations of my old life that owned warehouses, safer than robbery, steadier, and far more profitable. I used to guard the 100 fragrance rice like a state secret. Then I learned the cultivation world has a spiritual rice called heavenly fragrance rice that makes mine look like a parlor trick, good for brewing beast-luring incense. That rice sells here for ordinary silver, which tells me how little the immortals think of it. so I brought mine into the open and traded with every wealthy name in the city. A few of them sent men with other intentions, and Uncle Hio Sang sent those men back in a condition that made everyone else polite. Through those buyers, our reach climbs toward the officials, and by next year I expect a hand inside the government offices. Our inn in Cheonsu City exists because of them. But dignitaries are only half my target. The other half are the people nobody counts. The porters and beggars and errand boys, who are easier to win and far more loyal. Whoever feeds a starving man owns his eyes and ears for life, and food is the one thing I have in quantity. Once the grain-fasting rice came in, I cooked it with 100 fragrance rice and rolled the result into balls glazed in hardened syrup, like the candied fruit skewers of my old life. I call them grain-fasting pills, and one carries a grown man through a meal. An adult eats about half a pound of rice a day, and half a pound becomes over 100 pills, enough to fill 30 stomachs and leave all 30 strong enough to work. On that foundation, I built a beggar gang, and it is now the fastest news in Cheonsu City. I read the reports in my hand. The first explains why Lee Bugwi has been hoarding wealth like a man possessed, because his son has taken a master. Lee Mun was accepted as a disciple, and his father is spending a fortune on alchemy materials to buy the boy a place on the immortal path. The master is Gom Jijo, skilled in fire control techniques, arrived from the west, and nothing else about him is known. He looks the part, but the shape of it smells like a swindler, since a real immortal should not need a landlord's gold. The second report is a monster beast, and my pulse jumps until I reach the location. The thing is out in Manhwa City, and a round trip would eat 2 months. It was a tiger type that came from the west and killed its way through several villages before an immortal put it down. West again. Everything lately comes out of the west, which makes me wonder whether men and monster beasts are at war out there, and whether that is why the spirit testing ceremony keeps being postponed. I burn the papers when I finish, since with everlasting memory the safest archive is my own skull. The sources are my beggar gang and a spread of middling informants, since the high official line is not established yet, so the reports are credible without being gospel. What I need next is not in any report. What I need next is a teacher. I have had my eye on the Evergreen Medical Hall for months, and on its physician, Shim Gi. 9 people in 10 simply call him Dr. Shim, and his name carries across the whole span of Cheonsu City. His diagnoses are famous and his compounding technique more famous still, since the medicines he mixes are said to cure on contact. I match the file in my memory against the elegant middle-aged man across the tea table. He sips and asks gently whether I truly mean to become his disciple. I tell him I have been drawn to medicine since I could read, that I have gone through every medical book in this city, and that book learning without practice is a dead end. He offers a test, saying that if I can answer he might take me on. He starts with plain symptoms, then herbs and properties and formulas, and I answer without pausing. When a name gives in doubt, I sketch the plant on his paper with the drawing hand I have been grinding since I was 4. The sketches match the book illustrations line for line, and his face stops being amused. By the time the questions run out, he is not testing me but consulting me. He sets the cup down and tells me almost mournfully to go home, because he has nothing left to teach. I have discouraged my own future teacher in one conversation. So I ask him about the compounding technique, offer to become his disciple for it, and promise to pay tuition. He pauses with the teacup halfway down. Then he says the technique is his family legacy, and that his own son is, well, and he lets the sentence die. Rather than carry it into the ground, he would rather it went to me, so another famous physician might come out of it, and he thinks his ancestor would approve. Then he waves off the discipleship, saying we will simply discuss things with each other, and that I am welcome on his house calls. I stand and bow to him, deep and slow, because in this era, a man who hands his living to a stranger has earned that much. He starts to lift me by the elbow, changes his mind, and accepts the bow standing still. From that day, the Evergreen Medical Hall has a second and much shorter doctor, and wherever Dr. Shim goes on call, I go behind him. Everyone can see he has taken an apprentice, and everyone is baffled that we never call each other master and disciple. Nobody minds, since the hall has a successor. Winter arrives with snow coming down and goose feathers, and an old woman shuffles in complaining that she is burning up all over in the dead of the cold season. It is my day on duty since Dr. Shim is out on calls, so I seat her and begin. The examination is theater. I knew her illness the moment she crossed the doorway, because appraisal laid it out before she sat down. A common cold. 2 days along, her health at 75%. That reading is half a year old as a habit. The first time I tried a diagnosis here, the system spoke. And when it upgraded, was not a medical skill at all. Appraisal gained a branch, the 4 examinations, meaning observation, listening, questioning, and palpation. I already used the 4 with some skill, and now that they live in the system, a glance tells me what is wrong. It needs a deliberate reach, but everyone who comes through that door is sick anyway. I tell her not to worry, that it is only a cold if a stubborn one. She catches my sleeve before I reach the shelves, and asks for one of my liquid medicines instead, since the boiled decoctions taste like punishment and mine tastes good. I warn her that a liquid takes longer, and she says she is old and waiting is free. Since the little divine doctor invented the sweet medicine, she adds, nobody in the district can stomach the bitter kind. People in this world have terrifying constitutions, and a woman who walks in on her own feet with a 2-day fever is practically an athlete. The liquid comes out sweet, close to the cold syrups I remember, since I built the formula from those memories crossed with what I have learned here. It also woke a new skill the first time I mixed it, pharmacy, which has been climbing quietly since. I bottle it, wrap it, hand it over, and after enough thank yous to embarrass a saint, the hall is quiet again. I call up the panel while the room is still. My name at the top, Kang Ran, with child prodigy currently equipped in Night Owl, father of winter fishing and little divine Dr. Idol beneath it. Lifespan reads 8 of 88. Comprehension ability reads 110, 20 of that borrowed from the equipped title. My realm sits at body refining layer 2, halfway. Appraisal is still at max level, where it has been since the day I was born, and it now carries the 4 examinations. Learning has just reached major achievement, with everlasting memory and the 50% experience bonus branching off it. And teaching sits at minor achievement past halfway with teacher's authority. Farming reads perfection with the bar not quite half filled, and under it hang mutation, harvest plus 10% and breeding. Forging is minor achievement and nearly full, with success rate plus 5%. Pharmacy is entry level and past the middle. Fishing crawls at minor achievement with never go empty-handed. And cooking sits at minor achievement with deliciousness plus 30. In another month the new year comes, and then I turn 9. This year threw very little at me. Body refining kept its pace, and little else grew, though it turned out to extend lifespan, so my ceiling is 10 years higher than it was. Farming only moved during the busy season, and since I started medicine it has not moved at all. I never got a medical skill out of this, but the real goal is met, because I came here to read a body through appraisal. The little divine doctor title is incidental gain that raises my name across Cheonsu City. I look at the panel whenever the room goes quiet, because it is the only honest accounting of a year I get. Then I set the next one. Body refining stays the spine of it with everything else balanced in as the days allow, and farming should keep climbing so I can see what waits past perfection. Spring planting alone will pour experience into it, and forging and fishing stay shelved on purpose. The door bangs and scatters the thought. Dr. Shim comes in shaking snow off his shoulders, and when I ask about the calls he says winter is a season of colds and that my liquid medicines have made his life absurdly easy. They travel in a pocket and go down without a fight, and today a child asked him for a second bottle, which had the whole household laughing. Once he starts on a story he cannot be stopped, and I let him run because I genuinely enjoy this ordinary life. When he winds down I tell him I am going home to my village tomorrow. He blinks, then nods, saying the new year is nearly on us, and admits he had meant to invite me home to introduce me to his son. Then I give him the rest. I thank him for 6 months of care, tell him I will most likely not be back next year, and mention that the tuition is already in his safe. I hand him the expenditure ledger while I say it. He freezes with the book in his hands and turns pages without seeing them. Every entry is recorded down to the last coin, with the tuition at the bottom. He starts to object to the size of the number and I cut him off, telling him that what he gave me cannot be answered with silver. Then I put an iron token in his hand. If he ever needs help, he should take it to the manager of the Dragon Gate Inn, our open face in this city. In matters large and small within Cheonsu City, I still hold some sway. He closes his fingers around it, and I watch him understand that I am not coming back at all. He has known for a while what I am. He has watched me talk crops with farmers, swing a hammer beside a blacksmith, and cook well enough that the few meals he tasted from my hand drew praise he never stopped repeating. He watched me invent the liquid medicines and hand him the method without asking for a share, which is what he did with a family legacy he owed me nothing of. He does not want me to go, and he knows a place like this cannot hold a dragon resting in the shallows. The hall goes quiet and neither of us fills it. Then Dr. Shim laughs with real relief and tells me I am a genius with a limitless road ahead. In the same breath he says we should go to his house tonight because he has been thinking about my pickled fish for a week. I laugh and tell him he is getting my best dish, then run for the market while it is still open. Behind me he turns the iron token over and reads my name stamped into it. He tucks it inside his robe and watches the snow drift past the window. Time moves too fast, he thinks, and handing that thing to little Rand is probably not a bad decision, since the Shim family loses nothing by it and gains a good tie. That is the real reason for the invitation, though I do not learn it until later. That night, a small courtyard house in the city is loud and bright. I carry in the basin of pickled fish myself, steaming, and set it on a table with no room left. There are shredded potatoes in vinegar and chili, there is spiced chicken, and a hot pot is already breathing steam at the center. Madame Cheon Ogyeon, the doctor's wife, calls me to stop fussing and sit down, since there is no room left on the table anyway. Her own cooking is extraordinary in its own right. Dr. Shim opens a bottle of rice wine and gets as far as pouring 2 cups before his wife wraps his knuckles with a chopstick. I am a child, she reminds him, and children do not drink. They are over the shock by now, but it still unsettles them that the young man across the table who looks 15 or 16 is not yet 9. He apologizes, saying he forgets constantly because I do not act like a child in any respect. I nod, sit, and eat, and the meal is warm in a way that has nothing to do with the hot pot. An hour later, I stand to go, and he walks me to the courtyard gate. I tell him to go back inside, since the cold is unkind to men his age. He agrees, then stops me by putting a book in my hands. He asks whether he ever told me his grandfather was a cultivator, and I admit he did not. The Shim family was a name once, he says, and his grandfather dreamed of raising them into a cultivation world family, and copied the technique he practiced several times over in his own hand. Then his voice drops. In all the years since, no one in the Shim family has been born with a spiritual root, and his grandfather died with that regret in him. He tells me I am a genius, that perhaps I have the root his family never got, and that the book is mine, so I will go and see that world for them. For a moment I have nothing to say. It is far too precious a gift, and I need it far too badly to hand back. He watches the first genuinely conflicted expression I have ever shown him, and starts laughing again. He tells me not to be embarrassed, since the family holds several copies, and that if I become a cultivator they will have gained a great deal. Then he repeats what he asked of me before, that I go and see that world on his behalf, and he pats my shoulder while he says it. I look at this refined man who wants that world badly, and was never given the aptitude for it. So I tell him I will, and that great kindness is not answered with thanks. If I ever truly ascend, any descendant of the Shim family may bring that token and ask one thing of me. He nods, smiling. I step back a few paces, bow and walk the main road toward the inn. Behind me he mutters a blessing, that cultivation is a cruel road, and he hopes I make something of it. And then he goes back to his ordinary life. At the inn I shut the door and take the book from inside my coat. The Evergreen Art. I go through it slowly because the margins are packed with the grandfather's notes on the cultivation world, and those notes are worth as much as the technique. To enter that world, a man must either refine his body or cultivate energy. The energy road runs broader and further, and this world is built on it. It demands a spiritual root to begin, and anyone born without one is left with body refining, which costs more of everything. The Evergreen Art is a wood attribute technique. I have no idea whether I carry wood, but the notes say a spiritual root of any kind means a man possesses all 5 elements, with the grade decided by whichever attribute stands tallest. So anyone with a root can practice this, even imperfectly. There are a handful of unique roots too, lightning and wind and ice, and one of those would make the book useless to me. Either way, I intend to learn it first and argue with reality afterward. An hour later, I set it down with the whole thing memorized. Everlasting memory would have taken it in a single pass, but this was my first contact with cultivation theory, so I read word by word and let my comprehension ability do the rest. Now I only have to find out whether I have a spiritual root, which has the exact emotional texture of a gotcha pull in my old life. I close my eyes, empty my head, and recite the incantation. 10 minutes pass, 20, an hour, and there is nothing. Not a flicker, not a warmth. I break off and check every line of the method against what I did, and every line matches. I am aware that I am being impatient. I am also aware that the notes say a man with a root cannot feel nothing at all after an hour of correct practice. So perhaps I simply do not have one. I scrape my fingers through my hair, let out one long wretched noise into the dark, and drop flat on the bed while moonlight comes through the window. It is past midnight and I am nowhere near sleep, turning it over and refusing to quit. When my temper is back, I switch my equipped title to Night Owl and sit up again. I have a system. Let it teach me. 1 hour goes, then 3, then 5, and the window turns gray. The first line of sunlight touches me, and the world goes black, and green specks bloom and drift across the dark like pollen on water. I come awake with a jolt that nearly throws me off the bed, and the chime lands with it. The Evergreen Art has reached entry level, and I have obtained a wood spiritual root valued at 20. So I truly had nothing, and the system built me one out of a night of stubbornness. The pattern seems clear, that carrying a cultivation technique to entry level pays out a spiritual root of the matching attribute. The number must be aptitude, the same sort of figure as comprehension ability, and I have no reference to tell me whether 20 is respectable or humiliating. It hardly matters. Once a thing exists in my hands, grinding it is only a question of hours. The panel has a new row in it this morning. Name, Kang Ran. Night Owl currently equipped, with Child Prodigy, Father of Winter Fishing, and Little Divine Doctor beneath. Lifespan 8 of 88. Comprehension ability 90, which stings for 1 second until I remember I shelved the title it hands me. 20. Spiritual Root Wood 20. My realm reads Body Refining Layer 2 at halfway with Chi Refining at 0 under it. The evergreen art has a line of its own now, and that line reads entry level. I switch the title back to Child Prodigy, lie down with my mind finally quiet, and sleep through the morning. I wake at 8, which has not happened once since I was born into this life, and lie there rubbing my eyes faintly scandalized by my own body. Then I pack, because I am going home. The road gives me no trouble. The crowd outside our courtyard gate does. There is a crowd packed at the entrance and I shoulder through it. Inside the yard, Father Kang and second Uncle Kang Kwang stand shoulder to shoulder against the village chief and a knot of large men. The old chief keeps his voice civil, saying the villagers feel strongly and the Kang family should hand over the grain. Lee Bugui has brought in an immortal master for everyone, he says, which other villages can only dream of, and every other household is paid. The men behind him are not civil, and one tells my father he can hand over grain, or move out. My father says moving is fine, and asks who is buying his land. The big man starts to sneer that nobody wants those few plots, and my father runs straight over the top of him. If nobody is buying his land, then nobody is telling him to leave it. He turns on the crowd with his whole aura up and invites anyone who wants to seize Kang family land to say so to his face. The big man tries the majority argument instead, that everyone paid so we must pay. My father cuts that down too, offering to decline the protection along with the payment. That leaves them nothing, because it has no hole in it. What none of them know is that we had already decided to move after the new year. Shangpeng village gets better every month, and we have built one courtyard house and know how to build a second. What we will not do is leave because a mob told us to, since being run off your land is the kind of thing that follows a family forever. My father has heard this immortal master can throw fire, and his honest position is that protection would be pleasant and its absence survivable. At worst we run, and the Kang family has an unreasonable number of backup plans. The inspection team trades looks, finds nothing to say, and leaves with a warning that is mostly noise. The old chief lingers and tries once more, saying he knows we hold a grudge against Lee Bugui, but that in a time of war protection beats pride. My father's face does not move, and the old man walks away shaking his head. I call out to him then, and his whole expression changes. He tells me to come in and shouts for my mother to cook something decent for his son, suggesting hot pot, and mentions that my uncle the smith will be back in a couple of days. When I ask about the immortal master, he settles in and tells me the whole thing. I had guessed most of it, since the master is the fat boy's master, Gong Jijo. For months I had watched Lee Bugui accumulate wealth, waiting for his support to collapse, so I could hand him to the authorities. Now I see why the moment never came. As the hoarding got worse, the villagers did start pulling away, especially after the harvest, when most families cleared their debts to the Lee house. So Lee Bugui invited Gong Jijo to be stationed in Owa village, which gave him standing to demand money and grain for the immortal's upkeep. Naturally, some people asked why another man's master should cost them anything. The village split into a faction close to the Lee house that wanted to fund the tribute, and a larger, looser faction that would not pay a copper. They argued for weeks while the Kang family sat on our benches eating melon seeds. In the end, they held a vote, and by numbers alone the dissenters should have won, but somehow Lee Bugui had already bought most of them. The minority was told to obey or leave, and they swallowed it. Then somebody remembered the one household nobody had asked. When I asked my father what he actually plans to do, he says of course we are moving, because he is not eating that humiliation twice. When I ask why he shouted, then he says he was angry, and adds that a real immortal master is a real immortal master. Harsh words are free, but when it is time to run, you still run. With the evergreen art in my head, I can finally put a number on this immortal. Gong Jijo is not above Qi refining layer 3. Layers 1 through 3 form the early stage of Qi refining, and that stage has very little in it. Throwing fire is an early trick that impresses nobody who has read a book, and outside a few frightening-looking spells, such a cultivator is barely stronger than a mortal. Layer 4 is the middle stage, with real power behind it. It is also the point where a cultivator cannot linger among mortals for long. The mortal world is thick with turbid energy that fouls the practice and thin on spiritual energy. It can sustain a realm but never advance. 1. So anyone serious goes hunting for a spiritual vein. As a body cultivator at body refining layer 2, I am not frightened of him, because the notes are blunt that body cultivators dominate the early road. Leave me alone and I will happily leave everyone alone. The next day, the village learns what a real threat looks like. Late at night, on an empty stretch of the main road, several men run badly in the dark. One goes down under something that hits him from the side, and his scream stops in the middle, and what follows the scream is chewing. One man gasps that old Wang has been eaten. Another tells him to shut up and run, because if they reach Owa village, they live. They run, and the killing does not stop with old Wang. At dawn in Owa village, Wang the First is up early to start work when two men come stumbling in from the fields. They are covered in cuts and cannot breathe properly, and their eyes fix on him, and they lurch toward him. He watches them warily until he decides they are no danger. Then one gets enough air to demand that he fetch the immortal master, because there is a monster beast. Wang the first asks what in the world a monster what is, and both men promptly faint. He runs for the village head, and half the village carries the two bodies there to question them when they wake. The old man opens his door, takes one look, and goes gray. He has lived long enough to know the difference between a bandit's blade and a beast's mouth, and this is a beast, possibly the kind with demonic energy on it. He tells them to invite immortal master Gong Jijo at once, and two fast runners sprint for the Lee house. Gong Jijo arrives before long and bends over the wounded, and the longer he looks, the graver his face gets. From the shape of the wounds and the residue on them, he places it as a first-order monster beast in the early stage. Behind the composed expression, he is already packing his bags in his head and picking a route out of the village. Then the old village head asks him whether this is a monster beast, and what should be done, and Gong Jijo blinks and asks how a farmer knows the term. The old man says only that he has lived a long time, and repeats that they ought to be preparing. In that pause, the cowardice turns into greed. A first-order early-stage monster beast can be held by mortals if enough of them stand together. If the villagers pin it, his chi refining layer 3 cultivation and the sage spirit talisman give him a real chance at the kill. An intact corpse is worth a great many spirit stones, and spirit stones buy a breakthrough pill, which buys the middle stage of chi refining, where a cultivator can go anywhere and be fed. He decides it is feasible. He turns to the village head and says gravely that he accepted their offerings and will therefore keep Oha village safe. Every household is to prepare for battle, and the instant anyone sights the beast, he is to be told. Until he arrives, the villagers must hold it and keep it away from the women and children. The old man asks with difficulty whether mortals can hold a monster beast at all, and Gong Jijo tells him that if they encircle it without attacking it will stay contained. The village head is not comforted, but he has no other road. Owa village goes on alert, nobody works the fields, and they patrol in 2s and 3s past our courtyard. Word comes back to us in pieces. They are saying the Kang family has no immortal master, and that a monster beast turning up the morning after we refused proves heaven has an opinion about us. The patrol team even came by to explain the situation and left without demanding anything, which baffled us until we realized they had walked over purely to gloat. Thanks to their pettiness, we got the news early. So I run the numbers. I stand at body refining layer 2. Father Kang and second uncle Kang Guang have trained for years without breaking into layer 1. But they are close enough to count as half. If the beast really is first order early stage, defending a walled courtyard should not be beyond us. Running is the worst option, because the road outside is where a hunting beast would wait. The only real worry is my uncle the smith, Yan Myung-sang, who is due back on that road any day. We prepare anyway. I bring out the crossbows and hand them to everyone who can fight. The women and the 4 little ones go down into the cellar, and we set watches through the night. The first day passes with nothing. On the second, Uncle Yun Myung-sang comes through the gate whole and unbothered. Auntie throws her arms around him in front of everyone, which leaves the poor man frozen with his pack still on. He hears the story and goes quietly pale. Everyone else decides it was a false alarm, and I do not. The second day is quiet too. By the third, Owa village has relaxed, and the consensus is that the beast moved on to trouble some other village. The 2 survivors woke and confirmed that nothing chased them through the back half of their escape, which settled it for everyone. Late on the third night, the screaming starts, and within a minute, Owa village is people running in every direction and shrieking. One group moves the wrong way, against the flood, straight toward the sound. Those are mercenaries hired by Lee Bugui at enormous cost, men said to have handled monster beasts before, and Gong Jijo walks with them along with the Lee father and son. The father tells the boy to watch his master exercise the beast and learn everything he can, and the boy answers eagerly. The 2 of them are on an outing. Gong Jijo is not, because he knows the safe way to hunt. One of these is with 3 cultivators of his own realm. The mercenaries reach it first, and what they find is shaped like a dog and is not a dog. Someone names it a mad wolf, and someone else says that when a mad wolf goes berserk, it is a nightmare. Gong Jijo shouts at them to encircle it and takes a position behind them all. The casualties start at once. Then one mercenary does something suicidal and magnificent, vaulting onto the beast's back and locking on, refusing to be thrown. The fight freezes into that one struggle, with the others afraid to strike their own man. Gong Jijo's eyes light up at the opening. He pulls out the card he has been saving, and his magic pours into the paper until it blazes. The talisman becomes a fireball the size of a wash basin. Throwing heat, the villagers feel 100 paces off, and it strikes the monster beast dead on and detonates. A figure comes out of the blast screaming and lands as a blackened corpse. It is the man who is riding its back, killed by his own side. The clearing goes silent. Gong Jijo has eyes only for the motionless beast, telling himself that a medium-grade fireball talisman was his trump card, and nothing survives it. He has just solo hunted an early stage monster beast, and every scrap of material is his. The dead mercenary does not register with him at all, because the man was immortal, and he walks forward to claim the corpse. Then the mercenary captain starts screaming for his son. The man on the beast's back was his boy, raised and trained and meant to inherit everything. And he did not die to a monster beast. He died to the hired immortal's aim. Grief burns the reason out of the captain, and he draws his blade and comes for Gong Jijo's back. Something faster gets there first. The mad wolf on the ground opens its blood-red eyes, flips upright in one motion, and has Gong Jijo's throat in its jaws before he can turn his head. It shakes him the way a dog shakes a rag, venting everything the fireball did to it. Gong Jijo's head comes off and rolls to a stop in front of the Lee father and son. The smile on it caught halfway into horror, and the two of them scream themselves raw. The captain bellows at everyone to run, since the strongest man on the field is in two pieces. Everyone scatters, some out of the village, some home, and some toward the big mountain along a path that goes right past our gate. The knocking on our door is frantic. We are already up on boxes with our heads over the wall, watching Oha village burn in the dark, and none of us needs to be told what the people outside want. They shout for Kang John by name, telling him the monster beast is coming and that they grew up together and he cannot watch them die. Before all this, these same voices helped Lee Bugui mock and isolate my family. Now we are old friends, and my father's face starts to waver. We are spared the argument by Lee Bugui himself. He arrives shouting that running to the Kang family is pointless since even the immortal master is dead, and that anyone who wants to live should hide in the brush on the mountain. Once the beast is full, it will leave on its own, he says, and crowding together now is asking to be eaten. It is the first genuinely useful thing that man has ever said. The people at our gate stop knocking and follow him. On their way out, they curse my father for not saving them. He had been on the edge of opening that gate. Now he wants to climb the wall and answer them, and they are already gone. I tell him some people are simply built that way, and that we are lucky we did not save them first and hear it afterward. He nods, but he is looking at Oha village burning, the place he was born and raised in, and there is nothing to say except that all we can do now is protect our own. Privately, I work it through and decide we ought to be safe up here, because Lee Bugui was right about one thing. Monster beasts go where the crowds are,